Welcome back to Soul Speak Stories Journey Through Middle-earth. Today, we dive into The Two Towers, Book 2, Chapter 1. Milky Way. The Fellowship is fractured, and now Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli press forward, pursuing the orcs who captured Merry and Pippin. Their journey leads them into the untamed lands of Rohan, where shadows lengthen, and danger awaits at every turn. In this chapter, alliances are tested, and the steadfast courage of our heroes is challenged as they face foes old and new. Join Soul Speak Story as we continue this epic adventure of the Lord of the Rings series. Will they find their friends in time? Let's embark on this journey together. Something that would guide him in his perplexities, but time was pressing. Suddenly he leaped forward and ran to the summit, across the great flagstones and up the steps. Then, sitting in the high seat, he looked out, but the sun seemed darkened and the world dim and remote. He turned from the north back again to north and saw nothing save the distant hills, unless it were that far away he could see again a great bird like an eagle high in the air, descending slowly in wide circles down towards the earth. Even as he gazed, his quick ears caught sounds in the woodlands below. On the west side of the river he stiffed. There were cries, and among them, to his horror, he could distinguish the harsh voices of orcs. Then suddenly, with a deep throat call, a great horn blew, and the blasts of it smoked the hills and echoed in the hollows, rising in a mighty shout above the roaring of the firs. The horn of Babia, he cried, he's in need. He sprang down the steps and away, leaping down the path. An INF on this day all the TI goes amiss. Where is Sam? As he ran, the cries came louder but fainter now, and desperately the H was blowing. Fierce and shrill rose the yells of the orcs. Suddenly the horn go ceased. Aragorn raced down the last slope, but before he could reach the hill's foot the sounds died away, and as he turned to the left and ran towards them, they retreated until at last he could hear them no more. Drawing his bright sword and crying, he crashed through the trees. A mile maybe from Path Garin, in a little glade not far from the lake, he found Boromir. He was sitting with his back to a great tree, as if he was resting, but Aragorn saw that he was pierced with many black feathered arrows. His sword was still in his hand, but it was broken near the hilt. His horn clo in two was at his side. Many orcs lay slain piled all about him, and at his feet Aragorn knelt beside him. Boromir opened his eyes and strove to speak. At last slow words came. I tried to take the ring from Frodo, he said. I'm sorry I have paid. His glance strayed to his fallen enemies. 20 at least lay there. They have gone. Halflings orcs have taken them. I think they are not dead. Orcs bound them. He paused and his eyes closed wearily. After a moment he spoke again. Farewell, go to Meth and save my people. Failed? No, said Aragorn, taking his hand and kissing his brow. You have conquered, few have gained such a victory. Be at peace, and shall not fall. Boromir smiled. Which way did they go? What's Frodo there? Said Aragorn, but Boromir did not speak again. Thus passes the heir of Denir, Lord of the Tower of God. This is a bitter end. Now the company is all in ruin. It is I that have failed. Vain was Jen trusted me. What should I do now? Vimir has laid it on me to go to Minth, and my heart desires it. Where are the ring and the bearer? How shall I find them and save the quest from Theaster? He knelt for a while, bent with weeping, still clasping Boromir's hand. So it was that Legolas and Jimmy found him. They came from the western slopes of the hill, silently creeping through the trees as if they were hunting. Jimmy had his axe in hand and Legolas his long knife. All his arrows were spent. When they came into the glade they halted in amazement, and then they stood a moment with heads bowed in grief, for it seemed to them plain what had happened. Aoss, said Legolas, coming to Aragorn's side, we have hunted and slain many orcs in the woods, and we should have been of more use here. We came when we heard the whoring. We're too late it seems. I fear you have taken deadly H. Boromir is dead, answered Aragorn wearily. Before he died Boromir told me that the Orcs had bound them. He did not think that they were dead. I sent him to follow Merry and Pippin, but I did not ask him if Frodo and Sam were with him. Not until it was too late. All that I have done today has gone amiss. What is to be done now? First we must tend to Fallen, said Legolas. We cannot leave them lying like carrion among these foul oars, but we must be swift, said Jimmy. You would not wish us to linger. We must follow the orcs. There is hope that any of our company are living prisoners, but we do not know whether the ring-bearer is with them or not, said Aragorn. Are we to abandon him? Must we not seek him first? An evil choice is now before us. Then let us do first what we must do, said. We have not the time or the tools to bury our comrade fitly or to raise a mound over him. We might build. The labor would be hard and long. There are no stones that we could use nearer than the water side, said Jimmy. Then let us lay him in a boat with his weapons and the weapons of his vanquished foes, said Aragorn. We will send him to the Fs of Ros and give him to Anduin. The river of Gond will take care at Le that no evil creature dishonors his bones. Quickly they searched the bodies of the orcs, gathering their swords and cloven helms and shields into a heap. See, cried Aragorn, here we find tokens. He picked out from the pile of grim weapons 2 knives, leaf blade damasked in gold and red, and searching further he found also the sheaths black set with small green gems. No orc tools are these, he said. They were borne by the hobbits. Doubtless these orcs despoiled them but feared to keep the knives, knowing them what they are, work of westernness, wound about with spells of the bane of Mordor. Well, now if they still live, our friends are weaponless. I will take these things, hoping against hope to give them back. And I, said Legolas, will take all the arrows that I can find, for my crayer is empty. He searched in the pile and on the ground about, and found not a few that were undamaged and longer in the shaft than such arrows as the orcs were accustomed to use. He looked at them closely, and Aragorn looked on the slain, and he said, here lie many that are not folk of Mordor. Some are from the north, from the misty mountains, if I know anything of orcs in their kinds. And here are others strange to me. Their cure is not after the manner of orcs at all. There were 4 goblin soldiers of greater stature, sword slant-eyed, with thick legs and large hands. They were armed with short broad-bladed swords, not with the curved scimitars usual with orcs, and they had bows of yew in length and shape like the bows of men. Upon their shields they bore a strange device, a small white hand in the center of a black field. On the front of their iron helms was set an S rune wrought of some white metal. I have not seen these tokens before, said Aragorn. What do they mean? This is for SA, said Jimmy. That is easy to read. Nay, said Legolas, Sauron does not use the elf runes, neither does he use his right name, nor permit it to be spelled or spoken, said Aragorn. And he does not use white. The orcs in the service of Barad-dûr used the sign of the red eye. He stood for a moment and thought, this is for, he said at length, there is evil afoot in Isengard, and the west is no longer safe. It is as Gandalf by some means. The traitor Saruman has had news of our journey. It is likely too that he knows of Gandalf's fall. Pursuers from Moria may have escaped the vigilance of Lauon, or they may have avoided that land and come to Isengard by other paths. Walks travel fast, but Sauron has many ways of learning news. Do you remember the birds? Well, we have no time to pond RLES, said Jimmy. Let us bear Boromir away, but after that we must guess the riddles if we are to choose our course rightly, answered Aragorn. Maybe me there is no right choice. Taking his axe, the dwarf now cut several branches. These they lashed together with bowstrings and spread their cloaks upon the frame. Upon this rough boor they carried the body of their companion to the shore, together with such trophies of his last battle as they chose to send forth with him. It was only a short way, yet they found it no easy task, for Boromir was a man both tall and strong at the water sighed Aragorn. Remained watching the boar while Legolas and Jimmy hastened back on foot to Pathjin. It was a mile or more and it was some time before they came back paddling two boats swiftly along the shore. There is a strange tale to tell, said Legolas. There are only two boats upon the bank. We could find no trace of the other. Have orcs been here? Asked Aragorn. We saw no signs of them, answered Jimmy. In orcs would have taken or destroyed all the burr and the baggage as well. I will look at the ground when we come there, said Aragorn. Now they laid Boromir in the middle of the boat that was to bear him away. The grey hood and elven cloak they folded and placed beneath his head. They combed his long dark hair and arrayed it upon his shoulders. The golden belt of Lorien gleamed about his waist. His helm they set beside him, and across his lap they laid the clo and horn and the hilts and shard of his sword. Beneath his feet they put the swords of his enemies. Then fastening the prow to the stern of the other boat they drew him out into the water. They rowed sadly along the shore, and turning into the swift running channel they passed the green sword of Pathjin. The steep sides of Tol Bram were glowing. It was now mid-afternoon. As they went south the fume of Ros rose into shimmered before them a haze of gold. The rush and thunder of the Fes shook the windless air. Sorrowfully they cast loose the funeral boat. There Boromir lay restful, peaceful, gliding upon the bosom of the flowing water. The stream took him while they held their own boat back with their paddles. He floated by them and slowly his boat departed, waning to a dark spot against the golden mount, and then suddenly it vanished. Ros roared on unchanging. The river had taken Boromir son of Dirir, and he was not seen again in Rhys Tithe, standing as he used to stand upon the White Tower in the morning. But in Gondor in after days it long was said that the elven boat rode the falls in the foaming pool and bore him down through Osgiliath and past the many mouths of Anduin out into the great sea at night under the stars. For a while the three companions remained silent, gazing after him. Then Aragorn spoke. They will look to him from the White Tower, he said, but he will not return from mountain or from the sea. Then slowly he began to sing through Roan, over fen and field, where the long grass row. The west wind comes walking, and about the walls it goes. What news from the west, O wandering wind, do you bring to me tonight? Have you seen Boromir the Toll by moon or by starlight? I saw him ride over 7 streams, over waters wide and grey. I saw him walking in empty lands until he passed away into the shadows of the north. I saw him then no more. The north wind may have heard the horn of the son of Denir. O Boromir, from the high walls westward I looked afar, but you came not from the empty lands where no men are. Then Legolas sang from the mouths of the sea. The south wind flies from the sand hills in the stern. The wailing of the gulls it bears, and the gate it moans. What news from the south, those sighing wind, do you bring to me at eve? Where now is Boromir the fair? He tarries, and I grieve. Ask not of me where he doth dwell. So many bones there nigh on the white shores and the dark shores under the stormy sky. So many have passed down Anduin to find the flowing sea. Ask the north wind news of them. The north wind sends to me, O Boromir, beyond the gate the seaward road runs south, but you came not with the wailing gulls from the grey sea's mouth. Then Aragorn sang again from the gate of kings. The north wind rise and past the roaring Fs, and clear and cold about the tower its loud horn calls. What news from the north of mighty wind do you bring to me today? What news of Borea the bow, for he is long away beneath the Monhen? I heard his cry, there are many foes. He fed his cloven shield, his broken sword they to the water br. His head so proud, his face so fair, his limbs they laid to rest, and Ros golden Ros falls bore him upon its bree. O Boromir, the tower of God shall ever northward gaze to rouse golden Ros falls until the end of days. So they ended. Then they turned their boat and drove it with all the speed they could against the stream back to Pathg. You left the east wind to me, said Jimmy. But I will say more to you, that is as it should be said. Aragon in Minas Tirith they endure the east wind, but they do not ask it for tidings. But now Boromir has taken his road and we must haste to choose our own. They surveyed the green lawn quickly but thoroughly, stooping up to the earth. No orcs have been here on this ground, he said, otherwise nothing can be made out for certain. All our footprints are here, crossing and recrossing. I cannot tell whether any of the hobbits have come back since the search of Frodo began. He returned to the bank close to where the reel from the spring trickled out into the river. There are some clear prints here, he said. My hobbit went into the water and back, but I cannot say how long ago. How then do you know this riddle? asked Jimmy. Aragon did not answer at once, but went back to the camping place and looked at the baggage. 2 packs are missing, he said, and one is certainly Sam's. It was rather large and heavy. This then is the answer. Frodo has gone by boat and his servant has gone with him. Frodo must have returned while we were all away. I met Sam going up the hill and told him to follow me, but plainly he did not do so. He guessed his master's mind and came back here before Frodo had gone. He did not find it easy to leave Sam behind. But why should he leave us behind and without a word? said Jimmy. That was a strange deed and a brave deed, said Aragon. Sam was right. I think Frodo did not wish to lead any friend to death with him in Mordor, but he knew that he must go himself. Something happened after he left us that overcame his fear and doubt. Maybe hunter oars came on him and he fled, said Legolas. He fled certainly, said Aragon, but not, I think, from orcs. What he thought was the cause of Frodo's sudden resolve and flight. Aragon did not say the last words of Boromir. He kept long secret. Well, so much is at least now clear, said Legolas. Frodo is no longer on this side of the river. He can only have taken the boat and Sam is with him. Only he would have taken his pack. How choice then, said Gimli, is either to take the remaining boat and follow Frodo or else to follow the orcs on foot. There is little hope either way. We have already lost precious hours. Let me think, said Er. Go, and now may I make a right choice and change the evil fate of this unhappy day. He stood silent for a moment. I will follow the orcs, he said at last. I would have guided Frodo to Mordor and gone with him to the end, but if I seek him now in the wilderness I must abandon the captains to torment and death. My heart speaks clearly at last. The fate of the bearer is in my hands no longer. The company has played its part, yet we that remain cannot forsake our companions while we have strength left. Come, we will go now, leave all that can be spar behind. We will press on by day and dark. They drew up the last boat and carried it to the trees. They laid it beneath such of their goods as they did not need and could not carry away. Then they left Pathgar. The afternoon was fading as they came back to the glade where Boromir had fallen. Then they picked up the trail of the orcs. It needed little skill to find. No other folk makes such a trampling, said Legolas. It seems their delight to slash and beat down growing things that are not even in their way. They go with a great speed for all that, said Aragon, and they do not tire, and later we may have to search for our path in hard bare lands. Well, after them, said Jimmy. Where's two can go swiftly and they do not tire sooner than oaks, but it will be a long chase and they have a long start. Yes, said Aragon, we shall all need the endurance of dwarves, but come with hope or without hope we will follow the trail of our enemies, and woe to them if we prove the swifter. We will make such a chase that shall be accounted a marvel. Among the 3 kindreds, elves, dwarves and men, forth the 3 hunters. Like a deer he sprang away through the trees. He sped on and on, he led them tireless and swift. Now that his mind was at last made up, the woods about the lake they left behind. Long slopes they climbed, dark hard-edged against the sky already red with sunset. Dusk came, they passed away, grey shadows in a stone night. Dusk deepened, mist lay behind them among the trees below and brooded on the pale margins of the Anduin, but the sky was clear. Stars came out, the waxing moon was riding in the west, and the shadows of the rocks were black. They had come to the feet of stony hills, and their pace was slower, for the trail was no longer easy to follow. Here the highlands of the Emynmu ran from north to south in 2 long tumbled ridges. The western side of each ridge was deep and difficult, but the eastward slopes were gentler. furrowed with many gullies and narrow ravines. All night the three companions scrambled in this bony land, climbing to the crest of the first and tallest ridge and down again into the darkness of a deep winding valley on the other side. There in the still cool hour before dawn they rested for a brief space. The moon had long gone before them, the stars glittered above them, the first light of day had not yet come over the dark hills behind. For the moment Aragon was at a loss. The orc trail has descended into the valley, but there it had vanished. Which way would they turn, do you think? Said Lolus. Northward, to take a straighter road to Isengard or Fangor, if that is their aim as you guess, or southward to strike the Anish. They will not make for the river, whatever mark they aim at, said Aragon, and unless there is much amiss in Rohan and the power of Sauron is greatly increased, they will take the shortest way that they can find over the fields of the Rohim. Let us reach north. What the dale ran like a stony trough between the ridged hills, and a trickling stream red among the boulders at the bottom. A cliff frowned upon their right. To their left rose grey slopes, dim and shadow. In the late night they went for a mile or more northwards. Aragorn was searching, bent towards the grounds among the fens and gullies leading up into the western ridge. Legolas was some way ahead. Suddenly the elf gave a cry and the others came running towards him. We have already overtaken some of those that we are hunting, he said. Look, he pointed, and they saw that what they had at first taken to be bold as lying at the foot of the slope were huddled bodies. 5 dead orcs lay there. They had been hewn with many cruel strokes, and 2 had been beheaded. The ground was wet with their dark blood. Oh, here is another riddle, said Jimmy, but it needs the light of day, and for that we cannot wait yet. However you read it, it seems not hopeful, said Legolas. Enemies of the orcs are likely to be our friends. Do any folk dwell in these hills? No, said Aragon, the Rohim seldom come here, and it is far from Minth. It might be that some company of men were hunting here for reasons that we do not know yet. I think not. What do you think, said Jimmy? I think that the enemy brought his own enemy with him, answer Aaron. These are northern orcs from far away among the lane. There are none of the great orcs with the strange badges. There was a quarrel. I guess it is no uncommon thing with these foul folk. Maybe there was some dispute about the road. What about the captives, said Jimmy. Let us hope that they too did not meet their end here. Aragon searched the ground in a wide circle, but no other traces of the fight could be found. They went on. Already the eastward sky was turning pale, the stars were fading, and a grey light was slowly growing. A little further north they came to a fold in which a tiny stream, falling and winding, had cut a stony path down into the valley. In it some bushes grew, and there were patches of grass upon its sides. At last, said Aaron, here are the tracks that we seek up this water channel. This is the way that the orcs went after their debate. Swiftly now the pursuers turned and followed the new path as if fresh from a night's rest. They sprang from stone to stone. At last they reached the crest of the grey hill, and a sudden breeze blew in their hair and stirred their cloaks. The chill wind of dawn. Turning back they saw across the river the far hills kindled. Day leapt into the sky. The red rim of the sun rose over the shoulders of the dark land before them. In the west the world lay still, formless and grey, but even as they looked, the shadows of night melted. The colors of the waking earth returned. Green flowed over the wide meads of Rohan. The white mists shimmered in the water vales, and far off to the left, 30 leagues or more, blue and purple, stood the white mountains, rising into peaks of jet tipped with glimmering snows flushed with the rose of morning. Gondor, Gondo, cried Aragon, would that I looked on you again in happier hour. Not yet does my road lie southward to your bright streams. Gondor, Gondor, between the mountains and the sea. West wind blew there, the light upon the silver tree fell like bright rain in gardens of the kings of old. O proud walls, white towers, O winged crown and throne of gold, O Gondor, Gondor, shall men behold the silver tree? Or west wind blow again between the mountains and the sea. Now let us go, he said, drawing his eyes away from the south and looking out west and north to the way that he must tread. The ridge upon which the companions stood went down steeply before their feet. Below it 20 fathoms a wall there was a wide and rugged shelf which ended suddenly in the brink of a sheer cliff. The east wall of Ran, so ended the Ynwil, and the green plains of the Rohim stretched away before them to the edge of sight. Look! Cried Legolas, pointing up into the pale sky above them. There is the eagle again. He is very high. He seems to be flying now away from this land back to the north. He is going with great speed. Look now, not even my eyes can see him. My good Legolas, said Aragorn, he must be far off indeed. I wonder what is his errand, if he is the same bird that I have seen before. But look, I can see something nearer at hand and more urgent. There is something moving over the plain. Many things, said Legolas. It is a great company on foot, but I cannot say more nor see what kind of folk they may be. They are many leagues away, 12 I guess, but the flatness of the plain is hard to measure, I think, nonetheless, and we no longer need any trail to tell us which way to go, said Gimli. Let us find a path down to the fields as quick as may be. I doubt if you will find a path quicker than the one that the orcs chose, said Aragorn. They follow their enemies now by the clear light of day. It seemed that the orcs had pressed on with all possible speed. Every now and again the pursuers found things that had been dropped or cast away: food bags, the rinds and crusts of hard grey bread, a torn black cloak, a heavy iron-nailed shoe broken on the stones. The trail led them north along the top of the escarpment, and at length they came to a deep cliff carved in the rock by a stream that splashed noisily down in the narrow ravine. A rough path descended like a steep stair into the plain. At the bottom they came with a strange suddenness on the grass of Rohan. It swelled like a green sea upon the very foot of the Mule. The falling stream vanished into a deep growth of cresses and water plants, and they could hear it tinkling away in green tunnels down long gentle slopes towards the fence of Anish Vale. Far away they seemed to have left winter clinging to the hills behind. Here the air was softer and warmer and faintly scented, as if spring was already stirring and the sap was flowing again in herb and leaf. Legolas took a deep breath like one that drinks a great draught after a long thirst. In barren places the green smell, he said, this is better than much sleep. Let us run. Light feet may run swiftly here, said Aragorn, more swiftly maybe than the Iron Sh orcs. Now we have a chance to lessen their lead. They went in single file, running like hounds on a strong scent, and an eager light was in their eyes. Nearly due west the broad swath of the marching orcs tramped its ugly slot. The sweet grass of Rohan had been bruised and blackened as they passed. Presently Aragorn gave a cry and turned aside. Stay, he shouted, do not follow me yet. He ran quickly to the right, away from the main trail, for he had seen footprints that went that way, branching off from the others, the marks of small, unshod feet. These, however, did not go far before they were crossed by orc prints also coming out from the main trail behind and in front, and then they curved sharply back again and were re-lost in the trampling at the furthest point. Aragorn stooped and picked up something from the grass, then he ran back. Yes, he said, these are quite plain a hobbit's footprints. Pippin, I think he is smaller than the other, and look at this. He held up a thing that glittered in the sunlight. It looked like the new opened leaf of a beech tree, fair and strange in that treeless plain. The of, cried Legolas and Jimmy together. Not idly do the leaves of Lorien fall, said Aragorn. This did not drop by chance, it was cast away as a token to any that might follow. I think Pippin ran away from the trail for that purpose. Then he at least beast was alive, said Jimmy, and he had the use of his wits and of his legs too. That is heartening. We do not pursue in vain. Let us hope that he did not pay too dearly for his boldness, said Legolas. Come, let us go on. The thought of those merry young folk driven like Cattle burns my heart. The sun climbed to the moon and then rode slowly down the sky. Light clouds came up out of the sea in the distant south and were blown away upon the breeze. The sun sank, shadows rose behind and reached out long arms from the east. Still the hunters held on. One day now had passed since Boromir fell and the orcs were yet far ahead. No longer could any sign of them be seen in the level plains. As nightshade was closing about them, Aragorn halted only twice in the days march had they rested for a brief while, and 12 leagues now lay between them and the eastern wall where they had stood at dawn. We have come at last to a hard choice, he said. Shall we rest by night, or shall we go on while our will and strength hold? Unless our enemies rest also, they will leave us far behind. If we stay to sleep, surely even orcs must pause on the march, said Jimmy. Seldom will orcs journey and they open under the sun, yet these have done so, said Legolas. Certainly they will not rest by night, and if we walk by night we cannot follow that trail, said Jimmy. The trail is straight and turns neither right nor left as far as my eyes can see, said Legolas. Maybe I could lead you at guess in the darkness and hold to the line, said Aragorn. But if we strayed or they turned aside, then when light came there might be long delay before the trail was found again. And there is this also, said Jimmy. Only by day can we see if any tracks lead the way. If a prisoner should escape, or if one should be carried off eastward, say to the great river towards Mordor, we might pass the signs and never know it. That is true, said Aragorn, but if I read the signs back yonder rightly, the orcs of the White Hand prevailed and the whole company is now bound for Isengard. Their present course spares me out, yet it would be rash to be sure of their counsels, said Jimmy. And what of escape in the dark? We should have passed the signs that led you to the Br. The oaks will be doubly on their guard since then, and the prison is even wearier, said Legolas. There will be no escape again if we do not contrive it. How that is to be done cannot be guessed. But first we must overtake them, and yet even a dwarf of many journeys and not the least hardy of my folk cannot run all the way to Isengard without any pause, said Jimmy. My heart burns me too. I would have started sooner, but now I must rest a little to run the better, and if we rest then the blind night is the time to do so. I said that it was a hard choice, said Aragorn. How shall we end this debate? You are our guide, said Jimmy, and you are skilled in the chase. You shall choose. My heart bids me to go on, said Legolas, but we must hope together. I will follow your counsel. You give the choice to an ill chooser, said Aragorn. Since we passed through the Argonath my choices have gone amiss. He fell silent, gazing north and west into the gathering night for a long while. We will not walk in the dark, he said at length. The peril of missing the trail or signs of other coming and going seems to me the greater. If the moon gave enough light we would use it, but alas, he sets early and is yet young and pale, and tonight he is shrouded. Anyway, Gimli murmured, would that the lady had given a sight such a gift that she gave to Frodo. It will be more needed where it is bestowed, said Aragorn. With him lies the true quest. Ours is but a small matter in the great deeds of this time, a vain pursued from its beginning, maybe, which no choice of mine can mar or mend. Well, I have chosen, so let us use the time as best we may. He cast himself on the ground and fell at once into sleep, for he had not slept since their night under the shadow of tall briar before dawn was in the sky. He woke and rose. Jimmy was still deep in slumber. But Legolas was standing gazing northwards into the darkness, thoughtful and silent as a young tree in a windless night. They are far away, he said sadly, turning to Aragorn. I know in my heart that they have not rested this night. Only an eagle could overtake them now. Nonetheless we will still follow as we may, said Aragorn. Stooping he roused the dwarf. Come, we must go, he said. The scent is growing cold, but is it still dark, said Gimli. Even legal lasses on a hilltop could not see them with the sun up. I fear they have passed beyond my Sight from hill or plain under moon or sun, said Legolas. Where sight fails the earth may bring us rumor, said Aragorn. The land must groan under their hated feet. He stretched himself upon the ground with his ear pressed against the turf. He lay there motionless for so long a time that Gimli wondered if he had swooned or fallen asleep. Again dawn came glimmering, and slowly a grey light grew about them. At last he rose, and now his friends could see his face. It was pale and drawn, and his look was troubled. The rumor of the earth is dim and confused, he said. Nothing walks upon it for many miles about us. Faint and are the feet of our enemies, but loud are the hoofs of the horses. It comes to my mind that I heard them even as I lay on the ground in sleep, and they troubled my dreams. Horses galloping, passing in the west, but now they are drawing ever further from us, riding northward. I wonder what is happening in this land. Let us go, said Legolas. So the third day of their pursuit began. During all its long hours of cloud and fitful sun they hardly paused, now striding, now running, as if no weariness could quelch the fire that burned them. They seldom spoke. Over the wide solitude they passed, and their elven cloaks faded against the background of the great green fields. Even in the cool sunlight of midday, few but elvish eyes could have marked them until they were close at hand. Often in their hearts they thanked the Lady of Lauon for the gift of Lambaz, for they could eat of it and find new strength even as they ran all day the track of their enemies, led straight on, going northwest without a break or turn. As once again the day wore to its end, they came to long treeless slopes where the land rose swelling up towards a line of low humpback downs ahead. The orc trail grew fainter as it bent north towards them, for the ground became harder and the grass shorter. Far away to the left the river Entwash round a silver thread in a green floor. No moving things could be seen. Often Aragorn wondered that they saw no sign of beast or man. The dwellings of the Rohirrim were for the most part many leagues away to the south, under the wooded eaves of the White Mountains, now hidden in mist and cloud. Yet the horse lords had formerly kept many herds and studs in the East Emnet, this easterly region of their realm, and there the herdsmen had wandered much, living in camp and tent even in winter time. But now all the land was empty, and there was a silence that did not seem to be the quiet of peace. At dusk they halted again. Now twice 12 leaves they had passed over the plains of Rohan, and the wall of the Ammon Mule was lost in the shadows of the east. The young moon was glimmering in a misty sky, but it gave small light, and the stars were veiled. Now do I most drudge a time of rest or any hold in our chase, said Legolas. The orcs have run before as if the very whips of Sauron were behind them. I fear they have already reached the forest in the dark hills, and even now are passing into the shadows of the trees. Gimli ground his teeth. This is a bitter end to our hope and all our toil, he said. To hope maybe, but not to toil, said Aragorn. We shall not turn back here yet. I am wary. He gazed back along the way that they had come towards the night gathering in the east. There is something strange at work in this land. I distrust the silence, I distrust even the pale moon. The stars are faint, and I am weary as I have seldom been before, weary as no ranger should be. With a clear trail to follow, there is some will that lends speed to our foes and sets an unseen barrier before us, a weakness that is in the heart more than in the limb. Truly, said Legolas, that I have known since the first we came down from the M4. The will is not behind us but before us. He pointed away over the land of Rohan into the darkling west under the sickle moon. Saruman, muttered Aragorn, but he shall not turn us back. Halt, we must once more foresee. Even the moon is falling into gathering cloud, but north lies our road between down and fen. When day returns as before. Legolas was first afoot, if indeed he had ever slept. Awake, awake, he cried, it is a red dawn. Strange things await us by the eaves of the forest, good or evil I do not know, but we are called awake. The others sprang up, and almost at Once they set off again slowly, the downs drew near. It was still an hour before noon when they reached them, green slopes rising to bare ridges that ran in a line straight towards the north. At their feet the ground was dry and the turf short, but a long strip of sunken land some 10 mil wide lay between them in the river, wandering deep in dim thickets of reed and rush. Just to the west of the southermost slope there was a great ring where the turf had been torn and beaten by many tramping feet. From it, the Orc trail ran out again, turning north along the dry skirts of the hills. Aragorn halted and examined the tracks closely. They rested here a while, he said, but even the outward trail is already old. I fear that your heart spoke truly, Legolas. It is thrice 12 hours, I guess, since the Orcs stood where you'd now stand. If they held to their pace then at sundown yesterday they would reach the borders of Fangorn. I can see nothing away north or west but grass dwindling into mist, said Jimmy. Could we see the forest if we climb the hills? It is still far away, said Aragorn. If I remember rightly, these downs run 8 leagues or more to the north and then northwest to the issuing of the Andash. There lies still a wide land another 15 leagues mid. Maybe. Well, let us go on, said Jimmy. My legs must forget the miles. They would be more willing if my heart were less heavy. The sun was sinking when at last they drew near to the end of the line of downs. For many hours they had marched without rest. They were going slowly now and Jim's back was bent stone hard. Are the dwarves in labor or journey? But this endless chase began to tell on him as all hope failed in his heart. Aragorn walked behind him, grim and silent, stooping now and again to scan some print or mark upon the ground. Only Legolas still stepped as lightly as ever. His feet hardly seemed to press the grass, leaving no footprints as he passed. But in the waybread of the elves he found all the sustenance that he needed, and he could sleep if sleep it could be called by men, resting his mind in the strange paths of Elvis dream even as he walked open-eyed in the light of this world. Let us go up on this green hill, he said wearily. They followed him, climbing the long slope until they came out upon the top. It was a round hill, smooth and bare, standing by itself, the most northerly of the downs. The sun sank and the shadows of evening fell like a curtain. They were alone in a grey formless world without mark or measure. Only far away northwest there was a deeper darkness against the dying light, the mountains of mist and the forest at their feet. Nothing can we see to guide us here, said Gimli. Well, now we must halt again and wear the night away. It is growing cold. The wind is north from the snows, said Aragorn, and your morning it will be in the east, said Legolas. But rest if you must, yet do not cast all hope away. Tomorrow is unknown. Read of is found at the rising of the sun. 3 suns already have driven on our chase and brought no counsel, said Jimmy. The night grew ever colder. Aragorn and Gimli slept fitfully, and whenever they awoke they saw Legolas standing beside them, walking to and fro, singing softly to himself in his own tongue, and as he sang the white stars open in the dark black vault above. So the night passed together. They watched the dawn grow slowly in the sky, now bare and cloudless, until at last the sunrise came. It was pale and clear. The wind was in the east and all the mists had rolled away. Wide lands lay bleak about them in the bitter light. Ahead and eastward they saw the windy uplands of the W of Rohan that they had already glimpsed many days ago. From the great river northwestward stalked the dark forest of Fangor. Still 10 leagues away stood its shadowy eaves, and its furthest slopes faded into the distant blue beyond. There glimmered far away, as if floating on a grey cloud, the white head of tall Medas, the last peak of the misty mountains. Out of the forest the Anish flowed to meet them, its stream now swift and narrow and its banks deep. Clothing the Orc trail turned from the downs towards it, following with his keen eyes the trail to the river and then the river back towards the forest. Aragorn saw a shadow on the distant green, a dark swift moving blur. He cast himself upon the ground and listened again intently, but Legolas stood beside him shading his bright elven eyes with his long slender hand, and he saw not a shadow nor a blur but small figures of horsemen, many horsemen, and the glint of morning on the tips of their spears was like the twinkle of minute stars beyond the edge of mortal sight. Far behind them a dark smoke rose in thin curling threads. There was a s in the empty fields, and Jimmy could hear the air moving in the grass. Riders, cried Aragon, springing to his feet. Many riders on swift steeds are coming towards us. Yes, said Legolas, they are 105. Yellow is their hair and bright are their spears. Their leader is very tall. Aragon smiled. Keen are the eyes of the elves, he said. Nay, the riders are little more than 5 leagues distant, said Legolas. 5 leagues more, said Jimmy. We cannot escape them in this bare land. Shall you wait for them here or go on our way? We will wait, said Aragon. I am weary and our hunt has failed, or at least others were before us, for these horsemen are riding back down the Orc trail. We may get news from them or spears, said Jimmy. There are 3 empty saddles, but I see no hobbits, said Legas. I did not say that we should hear good news, said Aragon, but evil or good we will await it here. The 3 companions now left the hilltop where there might be an easy mark against the pale sky, and they walked slowly down the northward slope. A little above the hill's foot they halted, and wrapping their cloaks about them they sat huddled together upon the faded grass. The time passed slowly and heavily. The wind was thin and searching. Jimmy was uneasy. What do you know of the horsemen, Aragon? He said. Do we sit here waiting for sudden death? I have been among them, answered Aragon. They are proud and willful, but they are true-hearted, generous and thought indeed, bold but not cruel, wise but unlearned, writing no books but singing many songs after the manner of children of men before the dark years. But I do not know what has happened here of late, nor in what mind the hero may now be. Between the traitor Saruman and the threat of Sauron they have long been friends of the people of Gondor, though they are not akin to them. It was in forgotten years long ago that all the young brought them out of the north, and their kinship is rather with the Bings of Dale and with the Bearnings of the wood, among whom may still be seen many men tall and fair as are the riders of Rohan. At least they will not love the Orcs. But Gand spoke of a rumor that they pay tribute to Mordor, said Gimel. I believe it no more than did Bor, answered Aragon. You will soon learn the truth, said Legolas. Already they approach at length. Even Gimel could hear the distant beat of galloping hoofs. The horsemen following the trail had turned from the river and were drawing near the downs. They were riding like the wind now. The cries of clear strong voices came ringing over the fields. Suddenly they swept up with the noise like thunder, and the foremost horseman swerved, passing by the foot of the hill and leading the host back southward along the western skirts of the downs. After him they rode a long line of mail-clad men, swift, shining, fell and fair to look upon. Their horses were of great stature, strong and clean limed. Their great coats glistened, their long tails flowed in the wine. Their mans were braided on their proud necks. The men that rode them matched them well, tall and long limbed. Their hair flax and pale flowed under their light helms and streamed in long braids behind them. Their faces were stern and keen. In their hands were tall spears of ash. Painted shields were slung at their backs. Long swords were at their belts. Their burnished shirts of mail hung down upon their knees. In pairs they galloped by, and though every now and then one rose in his steps and gazed ahead at either side, they appeared not to perceive the 3 strangers sitting silently watching them. The host had almost passed when suddenly Aragon stood up and called in a loud voice, "What news from the north?" Riders of Rohan with astonishing speed and skill they checked their steeds, wheeled and came charging round. Soon the 3 companions found themselves in a ring of horsemen moving in a running circle up the hill slope behind them and down round and round them, and roaring ever Inwards Aragorn stood silent and the other two sat without moving, wondering what way things would turn. Without a word or cry suddenly the riders hailed. A thicket of spears were pointed towards the strangers, and some of the horsemen had bows in hand and their arrows were already fitted to the string. Then one rode forward, a tall man, taller than the rest. From his helm as a crest a white horsetail flowed. He advanced until the point of his spear was within a foot of Aragorn's breast. Aragorn did not stir. "Who are you and what are you doing in this land?" said the rider, using the common speech of the West in a manner and tone like to the speech of Boromir, man of Gondor. "I am called Strider," answered Aragorn. "I came out of the north. I am hunting orcs." The rider leapt from his horse, giving his spear to another who rode up and dismounted at his side. He drew his sword and stood face to face with Aragorn, surveying him keenly and not without wonder. At length he spoke again. "At first I thought that you yourselves were orcs," he said, "but now I see that it is not so. Indeed, you know little of orcs. If you go hunting them in this fashion, they were swift and well armed, and they were many. You would have changed from hunters to prey if ever you had overtaken them. But there is something strange about you, Strider." He bent his clear bright eyes again upon the ranger. "That is no name for a man that you give, and strange too is your raiment. Have you sprung out of the grass? How did you escape our sight? Are you elvish folk?" "No," said Aragorn, "only one of us is an elf, Legolas of the woodland realm in distant Mood. But we have passed through Lorien, and the gifts and favor of the lady go with us." The rider looked at the in renewed wonder, but his eyes hardened. "Then there is a lady in the Golden Wood, as the old tales tell," he said. "Few escape her nets. They say these are strange days, but if you have her favor, then you are also net weavers and sorcerers, maybe." He turned a cold glance suddenly upon Legolas and Jim. "Why do you not speak, Silent Ones?" he demanded. Jimmy rose and planted his feet firmly apart. His hand gripped the handle of his axe, and his dark eyes flashed. "Give me your name, Hem, and I will give you mine and more besides," he said. "As for that," said the rider, staring down at the dwarf, "the stranger should declare himself first. Yet I am named Heir, son of, and I'm called the third Marshal of the Radar." "Then Heir, son of Own, third Marshal of the Red Mark. Let Gimli the dwarf Glone warn you against foolish words. You speak evil of that which is fair beyond the reach of your thought, and only little wit can excuse you." His eyes blazed, and the men of Rohan murmured angrily and closed in, advancing their spears. "I would cut off your head, be it an all-master dwarf, if it stood but a little higher from the ground." "He stands not alone," said Legolas, bending his bow and fitting an arrow with hands that moved quicker than sight. "You would die before your strength fell." Raised his sword and things might have gone ill, but Aragorn sprang between them and raised his hand. "Your pardon, Heir," he cried. "When you know more you will understand why you have angered my companions. We intend no evil to Rohan nor to any of its folk, neither to man nor to horse. Will you not hear our tale before you strike?" "I will," said a, lowering his blade. "But wanderers in the Radar would be wise to be less hay in these days of doubt. First tell me your right name. First tell me who you serve," said Aragorn. "Are you friend or foe of Sauron, the Dark Lord of Mordor?" "I serve only the Lord of the Mark, the Odin King, son of Fel," answered Heir. "We do not serve the power of the Black Land far away, but neither yet are we at an open war with him, and if you are fleeing from him, then you had best leave this land. There is trouble now on all borders, and we are threatened, but we desire only to be free and to live as we have lived, keeping our own and serving no foreign lord, good or evil. We welcomed guests kindly in the better days, but in these times the unbidden stranger finds us swift and hard come. Who are you? Whom do you serve? At whose command do you hunt orcs in our land?" "I serve no man," said Aragorn, "but the servants of Sauron I pursue into whatever land they may go. There are few among mortal men who know more of orcs, and I do not hunt them in this fashion out of Choice the orcs whom we pursued took captive 2 of my friends in such need. A man that has no horse will go on foot, and he will not ask for leave to follow the trail, nor will he count the heads of the enemy save with the sword. I am not weaponless. Aragorn threw back his cloak, the elven sheath glittered as he grasped it, and the bright blade of Andúril like a sudden flame as he swept it out. Hell, he cried, I am Aragorn, son of Artha, and I am called Elisa the elf stone Duned, the heir of Isur Elendil, son of Gondu. Here is the that was broken and is forged again. Will you aid me or thwart me? Choose swiftly. Jim and Legolas looked at their companion in amazement, but they had not seen him in this mood before. He seemed to have grown in stature while Arya had shrunk, and in his living face they caught a brief vision of the power and majesty of the kings of stone. For a moment it seemed to the eyes of Legolas that a white flame flickered on the brows of Aragorn like a shining crown. Éomer stepped back, and a look of awe was in his face. He cast down his proud eyes. These are indeed strange days, he muttered. Dreams and legends spring to life out of the grass. Tell me, Lord, he said, what brings you here, and what was the meaning of the dark words? Long has Boromir, son of Denir, been gone seeking an answer, and the horse that we lent him came back. Are on us what doom do you bring out of the north? The doom of choice, said Aragorn. You may say this to Theoden, son of Thel. Open war lies before him with Sauron, or against him none may live now as they have lived, and few shall keep what they call their own. But of these great matters we will speak later. If chance allows, I will come myself to the king. Now I am in great need, and I ask for help, or at least for tidings. You heard that we are pursuing an orc host that carried off our friends. What can you tell us that you need not to pursue them further? Said Alman, the orcs are destroyed, and our friends we found none but orcs. But that is strange indeed, said Aragorn. Did you search the slain? Were there no bodies other than those of orcind? They would be small, only children to your eyes, unshod but clad in grey. There were no dwarves nor children, said Éomer. We counted all the slain and despoiled them, and then we piled the carcasses and burned them as is our custom. The ashes are smoking still. We do not speak of dwarves or children, said Jimmy. Our friends were hobbits. Hobbits, said, and what may they be? It's a strange name for a strange folk, said Jimmy, but these were very dear to us. It seems that you have heard in Rohan of the words that troubled Mentai. They spoke of the halfling. These hobbits are halflings. Halflings, laughed the rider that stood beside Éomer, but they're only a little people in old songs, in children's tales. Out of the north do we walk, in legends, or on the green earth in the daylight? A man may do both, said Aragorn, for not we but those who come after will make the legends of our time. The green earth, say you? That is a mighty matter of legend, though you tread it under the light of day. Time is pressing, said the rider, not heeding Aragorn. We must hasten south, Lord. Let us leave these wild folk to their fancies, or let us bid them and take them to the king. Peace, said Éomer in his own tongue. Leave me a while. Tell the Eed to assemble on the path and make ready to ride to the end. Wade, muttering, Éomer retired and spoke to the others. Soon they drew off and left Air alone with the 3 companions. All that you say is strange, Aragorn, he said, yet you speak the truth. That is plain. The men of the mark do not lie, and therefore they are not easily deceived. But you have not told all. Will you not now speak more fully of your errands, so that I may judge what to do? I set out from Imladris, as it is named in the rhyme, many weeks ago, answered Aragorn. With me went Boromir of Minth. My errand was to go to that city with the son of Denir to aid his folk in their war against Sauron. But the company that I joined with had another business, of that I cannot speak now. Gandalf the Gy was our leader. Gandalf exclaimed. Gandalf Grey is known in the mark, but his name, I warn you, is no longer a password to the king's favor. He has been a guest in the lands many times in the memory of men, coming as he will after a season or after many Years he is ever the herald of strange events, a bringer of evil. Some now say indeed since his last coming in the summer all things have gone on amiss. At that time our trouble with Saruman began. Until then we counted Saruman our friend, but Gandalf came then and warned us that sudden war was preparing in Isengard. He said that he himself had been a prisoner in Orthan and had hardly escaped, and he begged for help, but Theoden would not listen to him and he went away. Speak not the name of Gandalf loudly in Theoden's ears. He is wroth, for Gandalf took the horse that is called Shadowwax, the most precious of all the king's steeds, chief of the Meese, which only the Lord of the Mark may ride, for the sire of their race was the great horse of Aol that knew the speech of men. 7 nights ago Shadowfax returned, but the king's anger is not less, for now the horse is wild and will let no man handle him. Then Shadowfax has found his way alone from the far north, said Aragorn, for it was there that he and Gandalf parted. But alas, Gandalf ride no longer. He fell into darkness in the mines of Moria and comes not again. That is heavy tidings, said, at least to me and to many, though not to all, as you may find if you come to the king. It is tidings more grievous than any in this land can understand, though it may touch them sorely. Here the year is much older, said Aragorn, but when the great fold the must lead my part, it has been to guide our company on the long road from Moria through Lorien we came, of which it were well that you should learn the truth. Here you speak of it again and then down the leagues of the great river to the Fs of Ros. There Boromir was slain by the same orcs whom you destroyed. Your news is a woe, cried here in dismay. Great harm is this death to me. Taith unto us all a worthy man. All spoke his praise. He came seldom to the mark, for he was ever in the Ws on the east borders, but I have seen him more like to the swift sons of A than to the grave men of Gondor. He seemed to me and likely to prove a great captain of his people when his time came. But we have had no word of his grief out of Gondor. When did he fall? It is now the 4th day since he was slain, answered Aragorn, and since the evening of that day we have journeyed from the shadow of Tol Branda on foot, said Aam. Yes, even as you see us. Wide wonder came into Aam's eyes. Strider is too poor a name, son of Arar, he said. Wingfoot I name you. The steed of the 3 friends should be sung in many a hall. 40 leagues and 5 you have measured here. The 4th day is ended. Hardy is the race of Alindal, but now, Lord, what would you have me do? I must return in haste to Theoden. I spoke wearily before my men. It is true that we are not yet at open war with the Black Land, and there are some close to the king's ear that speak craven counsels, but war is coming. We shall not forsake our old alliance with Gondor, and while they fight we shall aid them. So say I, and all who hold with me. The East Mark is my charge, the ward of the 3rd Marshal, and I have removed all our herds and herd folk, withdrawing them beyond Endash and leaving none here but guards and swift scouts. Then you do not pay tribute to Sion, said Jimmy. We do not and never have, said A with a flash of his eyes, though it comes to my ears that lie has been told some years ago. The Lord of the Black Land wished to purchase horses of us at great price, but we refused him, for he puts beasts to evil use. Then he sent plundering orcs, and they carry off what they can, choosing always the black horses. Few of these are now left. For that reason our feud with the orcs is bitter, but at this time our chief concern is with Sarah. He has claimed lordship over all this land, and there has been war between us for many months. He has taken orcs into his service and wolf riders and evil men, and he has closed the gap against us, so that we are likely to be beset both east and west. It is ill dealing with such a foe. He is a wizard, both cunning and Weimer crafty, having many G's. He walks here and there, they say, as an old man, hooded and cloaked, very like to Gandalf. As many now recall, his spies slip through every net, and his birds of ill omen are abroad in the sky. I do not know how it will all end, and my heart misgives me, for it seems to me that his friends do not all dwell in Isengard, but if you come to the king's house you shall see for yourself. Will you not come? Do I hope in vain that you have been sent to me for help in doubt and need? I will come when I may, said Aragon. Come now, said the heir of Elendil, will be a strength indeed to the sons of Aol in this evil tide. There is a battle even now upon the west net, and I fear that it may go ill for us indeed in this riding north. I went without the king's leave, for in my absence his house is left with little guard, but scouts warned me of the orc host coming down from the east wall 3 nights ago, and among them they reported that some bore the white badges of sound. So suspecting what I most fear, a league between Orange and the Dark Tower, I led forth my aed men of my own household, and we overtook the orcs at nightfall 2 days ago. Go near to the borders of the Endwood, there we surrounded them and gave battle yesterday at dawn. 15 of my men I lost, and 12 horses. Alas, for the orcs were greater in number than we counted on. Others joined them coming out of the east across the great river. Their trail is plain to see a little north of this point, and others too came out of the forest, great orcs who also bore the white hand of Isengard. That kind is stronger and more fell than all others. Nonetheless we put an end to them, but we have been too long away. We are needed south and west. Will you not come? There are spare horses, as you can see. There is work for the sword to do, yes, and we could find a use for Jim's axe and the bow of Legolas if they will pardon my rash words concerning the lady of the wood. I spoke only as to old men in my land, and I would gladly learn better. I thank you for your fair words, said Aragon, and my heart desires to come with you, but I cannot desert my friends while hope remains. Hope does not remain, said you will not find your friends on the north borders, yet my friends are not behind. We found a clear token not far from the east wall that one at least of them was still alive there, but between the wall and the downs we have found no other trace of them, and no trail has turned aside this way or that, unless my skill has wholly left me. Then what do you think has become of them? I do not know. They may have been slayed and burned among the orcs, but that you will say cannot be, and I do not fear it. I can only think that they were carried off into the forest before the battle, even before you encircled your foes. Maybe can you swear that none escaped your net in such a way? I would swear that no orc escaped after we sighted them, said Arrow. We reached the forest thieves before them, and if after that any living thing broke through our ring, then it was no orc, and had from elvish power. Our friends were attired even as we are, said Aragon, and you passed us by under the full light of day. I had forgotten that, said Ere. It is hard to be sure of anything among so many marvels. The world is all grown strange. Elf and dwarf in company walk in our daily fields, and folks speak with the lady of the wood and yet live, and the sword comes back to war that was broken in the long ages. Here the fathers of our fathers rode into the mark. How shall a man judge what to do in such times as he has ever judged, said Aragon. Good and ill have not changed since yesteryear, nor are they one thing among elves and dwarves and another among men. It is a man's part to discern them as much in the golden wood as in his own house. True indeed, said Aam, but I do not doubt you nor the deed which my heart would do, yet I'm not free to do all as I would. It is against our law to let strangers w at will in our land until the king himself shall give them leave, and more strict is the command in these days of peril. I have begged you to come back willingly with me, and you will not. Loath I am to begin a battle of 100 against 3, and I do not think your law has made for such a chance, said Aragon. Nor indeed am I a stranger, for I have been in this land before more than once, and ridden with the hosts of the Rohim, though under other name and in other guise. You I have not seen before, for you are young, but I have spoken with and your father and with Theoden son of Thel. Never in former days would any high lord of this land have constrained a man to abandon such a quest as mine. My duty at least is clear to go on. Come now, son of, and the choice must be made at last. Aid us, or at the worst let us go free, or seek to carry out your law. If you do so, there will be fate to return to your war or to your king. Eyre was silent for a moment, then he spoke. We both have need of haste, he said. My company chafes to be away, and every hour lessens your hope. This is my choice. You may go, and what is more, I will lend you horses. This only I ask, when your quest is achieved or is proven vain, return with the horses over the Entway to Meduseld, the high house in Edoras where Theoden now sits. Thus you shall prove to him that I have not misjudged in this. I plock myself and maybe my entire life in the keeping of your good faith. Do not fail. I will not, said Aragon. There was great wonder and many dark and doubtful glances among his men when Ara gave orders that the spare horses were to be lent to the strangers, but only Eowyn dared to speak openly. It may be well enough for this lord of the race of Gondor, as he claims, he said, but who has heard of her horse of the mart being given to a dwarf? No one, said Jimmy, and do not trouble, no one will ever hear of it. I would sooner walk than sit on the back of any beast so great, free or begrudged. But you must ride now or you will hinder us, said Aragon. Come, you shall sit behind me, friend Jimmy, said Legolas. Then all will be well, and you need neither borrow a horse nor you'll be troubled by one. A great dark grey horse was brought to Aragon, and he mounted it. Azul is his name, said. May he bear you well and to better fortune than Gadf his late master. A small nigh horse but restive in fire was brought to Legolas. Arad was his name, but Legolas asked them to take off saddle and rein. I need them not, he said. It leapt lightly up, and to their wonder Arad was tame and willing beneath him, moving here and there with but a spoken word. Such was the ellish way with all good beasts. Jimmy was lifted up behind his friend, and he clung to him, not much more at ease than Sam Gamgee in a boat. Farewell, and maybe you will find what you seek. See, return with what speed you may, and let our swords hereafter shine together. I will come, said Aragon. And I will come too, said Jimmy. The matter of the Lady Galadriel lies still between us. I have yet to teach you gentle speech. We shall see, said. So many strange things have chanced that to learn the praise of a fair lady under the loving strokes of a dwarf's axe will seem no great wonder. Farewell. With that they parted. Very swift were the horses of Rohan when after a little Jimmy looked back. The company of Ara were already small and far away. Aaron did not look back. He was watching in the trail as they sped on their way, bending low with his head beside the neck of Hasso. Before long they came to the borders of the Anish, and there they met the other trail of which I had spoken, coming down from the east out of the wall. Aragon dismounted and surveyed the ground, then leaping back into the saddle he rode away some distance eastward, keeping to one side and taking care not to override the footprints. Then he again dismounted and examined the ground, going backwards and forwards on foot. There is little to discover, he said when he returned. The main trail is all confused with the passage of the horsemen as they came back. Their outward course must have lay nearer the river, but this eastward trail is fresh and clear. There is no sign there of any feet going the other way back towards Anduin. Now we must ride slower and make sure that no trace or footstep branches off on either side. The orcs must have been aware from this point that they were pursued. They may have made some attempt to get their captives away before they were overtaken. As they rode forward, the day was overcast. Low grey clouds came over the world. A mist shrouded the sun ever nearer, that the tree-clad slopes of Fangor loomed slowly darkling as the sun went west. They saw no sign of any trail to right or left, but here and there they passed single orcs fallen in their tracks as they ran, with grey feathered arrows sticking in back or throat. At last, as the afternoon was waning, they came to the eaves of the forest, and in an open glade among the First trees they found the place of the great burning, the ashes were still hot and smoking, beside it was a great pile of helms and mail-cloven shields and broken swords, bows and darts and other gear of war. Upon a stake in the middle was set a great goblin head, upon its shattered helm the white badge could still be seen. Further away, not far from the river where it came streaming out from the edge of the wood, there was a mound. It was newly raised, the raw earth was covered with fresh cut turfs. About it were planted 15 spears. Aragon and his companions searched far and wide about the field of battle, but the light faded and evening soon drew down, dim and misty. By nightfall they had discovered no trace of Merry and Pippin. "We can do no more," said Jimmy sadly. "We have been set many riddles since we came to Tol Brer, but this is the hardest to unravel. I would guess that the burned bones of the hobbits are now mingled with the orcs. It will be hard news for Frodo if he lives to hear it, and hard do for the old hobbit who waits in Rivendell." Helen was against their coming, but Gandalf was not, said Legolas. "But Gandalf chose to come himself, and he was the first to be lost," answered Jimmy. "His foresight failed him. The counsel of Gandalf was not founded on foreknowledge or safety for himself or for others," said Aragon. "There are some things that it is better to begin than to refuse, even though the end may be dark. But I shall not depart from this place yet. In any case we must here await the morning light." A little way beyond the battlefield they made their camp under a spreading tree. It looked like a chestnut, and yet it still bore many broad brown leaves of a former year. Like dry hands with long fingers they rattled mournfully in the night breeze. Jimmy shivered. They had brought only one blanket apiece. "Let us light a fire," he said. "I care no longer for danger. Let the orcs see as thick as summer moths round a candle. If those unhappy hobbits are astray in the woods, it might draw them thither," said Legolas. "And it might draw other things." "Neither orc nor hobbit," said Aragon. "We are near to the mountain marches of the traitor Saruman. Also we are on the very edge of Fangor, and it is perilous to touch the trees of that wood," it said. "But the Rohirrim made a great burning here yesterday," said Jimmy, "and they felled trees for the fire, as can be seen. Yet they passed the night after safely here, where their labor was ended." "They were many," said Aragon, "and they do not heed the wrath of Fangor, for they come here seldom, and they do not go under the trees. But our paths are likely to lead us into the very forest itself, so have a care, cut no living wood." "There is no need," said Jimmy. "The riders have left chip and bough enough, and there is dead wood lying in pl." He went off to gather fuel and busied himself with building and kindling a fire, but Aragon sat silent with his back to the great tree, deep in thought, and Legolas stood alone in the open, looking towards the profound shadow of the wood, leaning forward as one who listens to voices calling from a distance. When the dwarf had a small bright blaze going, the three companions drew close to it and sat together, shrouding the light with their hooded forms. Legolas looked up at the boughs of the tree reaching out above them. "Look," he said, "the tree is glad of the fire." It may have been that the dancing shadows tricked their eyes, but certainly to each of the companions the boughs appeared to be bending this way and that, so as to come above the flame, while the upper branches were stooping down. The brown leaves now stood out stiff and rubbed together like many cold cracked hands, taking comfort in the warmth. There was a silence, for suddenly the dark and unknown forest so near at hand made itself felt, as has a great brooding presence full of secret purpose. After a while Legolas spoke again. "Cabor warned us not to go far into Fangor," he said. "Do you know J.R.R. what are the fables of the forest that Bori had heard?" "I have heard many tales in Gondor and elsewhere," said Aragon, "but if it were not for the words of Celeborn I should deem them only fables that men have made. As true knowledge fades, I had thought of asking you what is the truth of the matter, and if an elf of the wood does not know, how shall a man answer?" "You have Journeyed further than I, said Legolas. I have heard nothing of this in my own land save only songs that tell how the Onad that men call Ents dwelt there long ago, for Fangorn is old even as the elves would reckon it. Yes, it is old, said Aragorn, as old as the forest by the Barrow Downs, and it is far greater. Aaron says that the two are Achen, the last strongholds of the mighty woods of the elder days in which the firstborn roamed while men still slept, yet Fangorn holds some secret of its own. What it is, I do not know, and I do not wish to know, said Jimmy. Let nothing that dwells in Fangorn be troubled on my account. They now drew lots of the watches, and the lot for the first watch fell to Gimli. The others lay down almost at once. Sleep laid hold on them. Gee, said Aragorn drowsily, remember it is perilous to cut bough or twig from a living tree in Fangor, but do not stray far in search of dead wood. Let the fire die, rather call me at need. With that he fell asleep. Legolas already lay motionless, his fair hands folded upon his breast, his eyes unclosed, blending living light and deep dream. And, as is the way with elves, Jimmy sat hunched by the fire, running his thumb thoughtfully along the edge of his axe. The tree rustled, there was no other sound. Suddenly Jimmy looked up, and there, just on the edge of the firelight, stood an old bent man leaning on a staff and wrapped in a great cloak. His wide-brimmed hat was pulled down over his eyes. Jimmy sprang up, too amazed for the moment to cry out, though at once the thought flashed into his mind that Saruman had caught them both. Aragorn and Legolas, roused by sudden movement, sat up and stared. The old man did not speak or make a sign. Well, father, what can we do for you, said Aragorn, leaping up to his feet. Come and be warm if you are cold. He strode forward, but the old man was gone. There was no trace of it to be found near at hand, and they did not dare to wander far. The moon had set and the light was very dark. Suddenly Legolas gave a cry. The horses, the horses, the horses were gone. They had dragged their pickets and disappeared. For some time the three companions stood still in silent, troubled by this new stroke of ill fortune. They were under the eaves of Fangorn, and endless leagues lay between them and the men of Rohan, their only friends in this wide and dangerous land. As they stood, it seemed to them that they heard far off in the night the sound of horses weeing and neighing. Then all was quiet again, except for the cold rustle of the wind. Well, they are gone, said Aragorn at last. We cannot find them or catch them, so that if they do not return of their own will, we must do without. We started on our feet, and we have those still feet, said Jimmy, but we cannot eat them as well as walk on them. He threw some fuel on the fire and slumped down beside it. Only a few hours ago you were unwilling to sit on a horse of our, laughed Legolas. You will make a rider yet. It seems unlikely that I shall have the chance, said Jimmy. If you wish to know what I think, he began again after a while, I think it was Saruman. Who else? Remember the words of a he walks about like an old man, hooded and cloaked. Those were the words. He has gone off without our horses or scared them away, and here we are. There is more trouble coming to us. Mark my words. I marked them, said Aragorn, but I marked also that this old man had a hat, not a hood. Still, I do not doubt that you guess right, and that we are in peril here by night or day. Yet in the meantime there is nothing that we can do but rest while we may. I will watch for a while now, Gimli. I have more need of thought than of sleep. The night passed slowly. Legolas followed Aragorn and Jimmy followed Legolas, and their watches wore away, but nothing happened. The old man did not appear again, and the horses did not return. Pippin lay in the dark and troubled dream. It seemed that he could hear his own small voice echoing in black tunnels, calling Frodo, Frodo, but instead of Frodo hundreds of hideous orc faces grinned at him out of the shadows. Hundreds of hideous arms grasped at him from every side. Where was Merry? He woke. Cold air blew on his face. He was lying on his back. Everything was coming, and the sky above was growing dim. He turned and found that the dream was little worse than the waking. His wrists, legs and ankles were tied with cords beside him. Merry lay white-faced with a dirty rag bound across his brows. All about them sat or stood a great company of orcs. Slowly in Pippin's aching head memory pieced itself together and became separated from dream shadows. Of course he and Merry had run off into the woods. What had come over them? Why had they dashed off like that, taking no notice of old Strider? They had run a long way shouting he could not remember how far or how long, and then suddenly they had crashed right into a group of orcs. They were standing listening, and they did not appear to see Merry and Pippin until they were almost in their arms. Then they yelled, and dozens of other goblins had sprung out of the trees. Merry and he had drawn their swords, but the orcs did not wish to fight and had tried only to lay hold of them, even when Merry had cut off several of their arms and hands. Good old Merry. Then Boromir had come leaping through the trees. He had made them fight. He slew many of them, and the rest fled, but they had not gone far on the way back when they were attacked again by 100 orcs, at least some of them very large, and they shot a rain of arrows always at Boromir. Boromir had blown his great horn till the woods rang, and at first the orcs had been dismayed and had drawn back, but when no answer but the echoes came, they had attacked more fiercely than ever. Pippin did not remember much more. His last memory was of Boromir leaning against a tree plucking out an arrow. Then darkness fell. Suddenly, I suppose I was knocked on the head, he said to himself. I wonder if poor Merry is much hurt. What has happened to Bimia? Why didn't the orcs kill us? Where are we? Where are we going? He could not answer the questions. He felt cold and sick. I wish Al had never persuaded Elon to let us come, he thought. What good have I been? Just a nuisance, a passenger, a piece of luggage, and I been stolen in just a piece of luggage for the orcs. I hope Strider or someone will come and claim us, but ought I to hope for it? Won't they throw out all the plans? Wish I could get free, he struggled a little, quite uselessly. One of the orcs sitting near laughed and said something to a companion in that abominable tongue. Rest while you can, little fool, he said then to Pippin in the common speech, which he made almost as hideous as his own language. Rest while you can, we'll find a use for your legs before long. You wish you had got nothing before we get home. If I had my way, you'd wish you were dead now, said the other. Make you squeak, you miserable rat. He stooped over Pippin, bringing his yellow fangs close to his face. He had a black knife with a long jagged blade in his hand. Not quiet, or I'll pickle you with this, he hissed. Don't draw attention to yourself, for I'm ERS cursing you. Passed into a long angry speech in his own tongue that slowly died away into muttering and snarling. Terrified Pippin lay still, though the pain at his wrists and ankles was growing and the stones beneath him were boring into his back. To take his mind off himself, he listened intently to all that he could hear. There were many voices round about, and though orc speech sounded at all times full of hate and anger, it seemed plain that something like a quarrel had begun and was getting hotter. To Pippin's surprise, he found that much of the talk was intelligible. Many of the orcs were using ordinary language. Apparently the members of 2 or 3 quite different tribes were present, and they could not understand one another's orc speech. There was an angry debate concerning what they were to do now, which way they were to take, and what should be done with the prisoners. There's no time to kill them properly, said one. No time for play on this trip. That can't be helped, said another. Why not kill them quick? Kill them now, they're a cured nuisance. You were in a hurry, the evening's coming on and we ought to get a move on. Orders, said a third voice in a deep growl. Kill all but not the halflings. They are to be brought back alive as quickly as possible. That's my orders. What are they wanted for? Why alive? Why alive? Ask several voices. Do they what? No, I heard that one of them has got something that's wanted for the war, some hellish plot or other. Anyway, they'll both be questioned. Is that all you know? Why don't we search them to find out? We might find something that we could use ourselves. That is a very interesting remark, sneered a voice softer than the others but more evil. I may have to report that the prisoners are not to be searched or plundered. Those are my orders, and mine too, said the deep voice. Alive as captured, no spoiling. That's my orders, not our orders. One of the ear vows. We have come all the way from the vines to kill and avenge a fall. I wish to Kill and then go back north, then you can wish again. So ring voice IMOLI command. I've returned to Isengard by the shortest road. Is Saruman the master or the great? I said the evil voice. We should go back at once. Till better if we could cross the great river we might, said another voice, but there are not enough of us to venture down the bridges I came across, said the evil voice. A wind null awaits us northward on the east bank. Maybe then you'll fly off without prisoners and get all the pay and praise and lug BS and leave us on foot as best we can through the horse country. No, we must stick together. These lands are dangerous, full of foul rebels and brigands. We must stick together, growled Ugl. I don't trust you, you little swine. You've got no guts outside of your own sty, but for us we all have run away. We are the fighting bind. We slew the great warrior. We took the prisoners. We are the servants of San the wise, the white hand, the hand that gives us bad flesh to eat. We came out of Isengard and let you here, and we shall lead you back by the way we choose. I am okay. I have spoken. You have spoken more than enough. Eugene near the evil voice. I wonder how they would like it in no birds. They might think that S shoulders needed relieving of a swollen head. They might ask where his strange ideas came from. Did they come from Saruman perhaps? Who does he think he is setting up on his own with his filthy white badges? They might agree with me, with Grishnak their trusted messenger, and I Grishnak say the San is a fool, a dirty treacherous fool, but the great eye is on him. Swine is it? How do you folk like being called swine by the MCK rakers of a dirty little wizard? It's or flesh it'll warrant. Many loud yells of speech answered him, and the winging clash of weapons being drawn cautiously. Pippin rolled over, hoping to see what would happen. His guards had gone to join the fray. In the twilight he saw a large black orc, probably a Gluck, standing facing Grishnak, a short crooked-legged creature, very broad, with long arms that hung almost to the ground. Around them were many smaller goblins. Pippin supposed that these were the ones from the north. They had drawn their knives and swords but hesitated to attack. Ugluk shouted, and a number of other orcs of nearly his own size ran out. Then suddenly, without warning, Ugluk sprang forward and with two swift throws swept the heads off two of his opponents. Grishnak stepped aside and vanished into the shadows. The others gave way and one stepped backwards and fell over Mary's prostrate form with a curse that probably saved his life, for UK's followers leaped over him and cut down another with their broad-bladed swords. It was the Yellow Fang guard. His body fell right on top of Pippin, still clutching his long swage knife. Put up your weapons, shouted Ugluk, and let's have no more nonsense. Go straight west from here and down the stair, from there straight to the downs, and then along the river to the forest, and we march day and night. Is that clear now? thought Pippin. If only it takes that ugly fellow a little while to get his troop under control, I've got a chance. A gleam of hope had come to him. The edge of the black knife had snicked his arm and then slid down to his wrist. He felt the blood trickling onto his hand, but he also felt the cold touch of steel against his skin. The orcs were getting ready to march again, but some of the northerners were still unwilling, and the Isengarders slew two more before the rest were cowed. There was much cursing and confusion. For the moment Pippin was unwatched. His legs were securely bound, but his arms were only tied about the wrists, and his hands were in front of him. He could move them both together, though the bonds were cruelly tight. He pushed the dead orc to one side, then, hardly daring to breathe, he drew the knot of the wrist, caught up and down against the blade of the knife. It was sharp and the dead hand held it fast. The cord was cut quickly. Pippin took it in his fingers and knotted it again in a loose bracelet of two loops and slipped it over his hands. Then he lay very still. Pick up those prisoners, shouted. Okay, don't play any tricks with them. If they are not alive when we get back, someone else will die too. An orc seized Pippin like a sack, put its head between his tied hands, grabbed his arms and dragged them down until P's face was crushed against its neck. Then it jolted off with it. Another treated Mary in the same way. The oak's claw-like hand gripped Pippin's arm like iron. The nails bit into him. He shut his eyes and back into evil dreams. Suddenly he was thrown onto the stony floor again. It was early night, that the dim moon was already falling westward. They were on the edge of a cliff that seemed to look out over a sea of pale mist. There was a sound of water falling nearby. The scouts have come back at last, said an orc close at hand. Well, what did you discover? Growled the voice of Ugluk. Only a single horseman, and he made off westwards. All's clear now I dare say. But how long, you fools, you should have shot him. He'll raise the alarm. The cursed horse breeders will hear of us by Ming. Now we'll have to leg it double quick. A shadow bent over Tipple. It was Uguk. Sit up, said the orc. My lads are tired of lugging you about. We have got to climb down, and you must use your legs. Be helpful now. No dying out, no trying to escape. We have ways of paying for tricks that you won't like, so they won't spoil your usefulness for the master. He cut the thongs around Pippin's legs and ankles, picked him up with his hair and stood him on his feet. Pippin fell down and Ugluk dragged him up by his hair again. Several orcs laughed. Ugluk thrust a flask between his teeth and poured some burning liquid down his throat. He felt a hot, fierce glow flow through. The pain in his legs and ankles vanished. He could stand now. For the other one, said Ugluk. Pippin saw him go to Merry, who was lying close by and kicking. Merry groaned. Seizing him roughly, Uguk pulled him into a sitting position and tore the bandage off his head. Then he smeared the wound with some dark stuff out of a small wooden box. Merry cried out and struggled wildly. The orcs clapped and hooted. Can't take is they know what's good for him. He shall have some fun later. But at that moment OK was not engaged in sport. He needed speed and had to humor unwilling followers. He was healing Merry an or fashion, and his treatment worked swiftly. When he had forced a drink from his flask down the hobbit's throat, cut his leg bonds and dragged him to his feet, Merry stood up looking pale but grim and defiant and very much alive. The gash in his forehead gave him no more trouble, but he bore a brown scar to the end of his day. Hello, Pippin, he said. So you've come on this little expedition too. Where do we get bed and breakfast now then? Said UK. None of that. Hold your tongues. No talk to one another. Any trouble will be reported at the other end, and he'll know how to pay you. You'll get bed and breakfast all right, more than you can stomach. The oak band began to descend the narrow ravine leading down into the misty plain below. Merry and Pippin, separated by a dozen orcs or more, climbed down with them. At the bottom they stepped onto grass, and the hearts of the hobbits rose now straight. All shouted, UK where? And a little north. Follow lush. What are we going to do with sunrise? Is that some of the northers go on running, said Uguk. What do you think? Sit on the grass and wait for the whiteskins to join the picnic. But we can't run in the sunlight. You'll run with me behind you. Is it UG? Run or you'll never see your beloved H again. By the white hand, what's the use of sending out mounted magos on a triple? They have tried. Then the whole company began to run with the long looping strides of orbs. They kept no order, thrustling, jostling and cursing, yet their speed was very great. Each hobbit had a guard of 3. Pippin was far back in the line. He wondered how long he would be able to go on at this pace. He had had no food since the morning. One of his guards had a whip, but at present the orc liquor was still hot in it. His wits too were wide awake. Every now and again there came to his mind unbidden a vision of the keen face of Strider bending over a dark trail and running behind. But what could even a ranger see except a confused trail of orc feet? His own little prince and Merry's were overwhelmed by the trampling of the iron-shod orcs before them and behind them and about them. They had gone only a mile or so from the cliff when the land sloped down into a wide shallow depression where the ground was soft and wet. Mist lay there pale glimmering in the last rays of the sickle moon. The dark shapes of the orcs in front grew dim and then were swallowed up. Steady now, shouted Ugluk from the rear. A sudden thought leapt into Pippin's mind and he acted on it at once. He swerved aside to the right and died out of the reach of his clutching guard. Head first into the mist he landed, SPR falling on the glass. The Ugluk. There was for a moment turmoil and confusion. Pippin sprang up and ran, but The orcs were after him. Some suddenly loomed up right in front of him. No hope of escape, thought Pippin, but there is a hope that I've left some of my own marks unspoiled on the wet ground. He groped with his two tied hands at his throat and unclasped the brute of his cloak. Just as long arms and hard claws seized him, he let it fall there. I suppose it would lie until the end of time, he thought. I don't know why I did it, but if the others have escaped, they've probably all gone with Frodo. A whip thong curled around his legs and he stifled a cry. Enough did Ugluk. Running up, he still got to run a long way, yet they can both run. Just use the whip as a reminder. But that's not, oh, he snarled, turning to Pippin. I shall forget. Payment is only put off. Look, neither Pippin nor Merry remembered much of their later part of the journey. Evil dreams and evil waking were blended into a long tunnel of misery, with hope growing ever fainter behind. They ran and they ran, striving to keep up the pace set up by the oars. Every now and again, with a cruel phone cuttingly handled, if they halted or stumbled, they were seized and dragged for some distance. The warmth of the orc drow had gone. Pippin felt cold and sick again. Suddenly he fell face downward on the turf. Hard hands with friending nails dripped him and lifted him. He was carried like a sack once more, and darkness grew about him. Whether the darkness of another night or a blindness of his eyes, you could not tell. That he became aware of voices clamoring. It seemed that many of the orcs were demanding a halt. Ugluk was shouting, and he felt himself flung to the ground, and he lay as he fell till black dreams took him. But he did not long escape from pain. Soon the iron grip of merciless hands was on him again. For a long time he was tossed and shaken, and then slowly the darkness gave way and he came back to the waking world and found that it was morning. Orders were shouting and he was thrown roughly on the glass. There he lay for a while, fighting with despair. His head swam, but from the heat in his body he guessed that he had been given another drow. An orc stooped over him and flung him some bread in a strip of raw dried flesh. He ate the stale grey bread hungrily, but not the meat. He was famished, but not yet so famished as to eat flesh flung from him by an orc, the flesh of he dared not guess what creature. He sat up and looked about. Merry was not far away. They were by the banks of a swift narrow river. Ahead mountains loomed. A tall peak was catching the first rays of the sun. A dark smudge of the forest lay on the lower slopes before them. There was much shouting and debating among the orcs. A quarrel seemed on the point of breaking out again between the northerners and the Isengers. Some were pointing back away south and some were pointing eastward. Very well, said Ugluk, leave them to me. No killing, as I've told you before, but if you want to throw away what we've come all the way to get, throw it away. I'll look after it. Let the fighting Uray do the work as usual. If you're afraid of the whiteskins, run, there's the forest, he shouted, pointing ahead. Get to it, it's your best hope. Off, go, and quick, before I knock a few more heads off to put some sense into the others. There were some cursing and scuffling, and then most of the northerners broke away and dashed off, over 100 of them running wildly along the river towards the mountains. The hobbits were left with the Isengarders, a grim dark band, 40 at least, of large sword-slanted orcs with great bows and short broad-bladed swords. A few, the larger and bolder northerners, remained with them. Now we'll deal with Grishnak, said Ugluk, but some of his own followers were looking uneasily southwards. I know, growled Okay, the cursed horse boys have gone. One of us, but that's all your fault, Slagger. You and the other scouts ought to have your ears cut off, but we are fighters. We'll feast on horse flesh yet, or something better. At that moment Pippin saw why some of the troop had been pointing eastward from that direction. There now came hoarse cries, and there was Grishnak again, and at his back a couple of score of others like him, long-armed, crooked-legged orcs. They had a red eye painted on their shields. Ugluk stepped forward to meet them. So you've come back, he said. Thought better of it. I've returned to see that orders are carried out, the prisoners safe, answered Grishnak. Indeed, said Ugluk, waste of effort. I'll see that orders are carried out in my command. And what else did you come back for? You went in a hurry. Did you leave anything behind? I left a fool, sned Grishnak, but there were some stout fellows with him that are too good to lose. I knew you'd lead them into a best. I've come to help them. Splendid. laughed Ugluk, but unless you've got some guts for fighting you've taken the wrong way. LBS was your road, the whiteskins are coming. What's happened to your precious Enzu? As he had another mount shot under him now. If you had brought him along that might have been useful. If these Nazgul are all that they make out, NN said Grishnak, shivering and licking his lips as if the word had a foul taste that he savored painfully. You speak of what is deep beyond the reach of your muddy dreams of El, he said, as all that they make out. One day you'll wish that you had not said that. Hey, he snared fiercely, you ought to know that they are the apple of the great eye, but the winged NZ school not yet, not yet. He won't let them show themselves across the great river yet, not too soon, before the war and other purposes. You seem to know a lot, said Ugik, more than is good for you, I guess. Perhaps those Edelbetter might wonder how and why, but in the meantime the Ode of Isengard can do the dirty work as usual. Don't stand slavering there, get your rebel together. The other swine are legging it to the forest, you'd better follow. You wouldn't get back to the great river alive. Right up the mark now, I'll be on your heels. The Isengarders seized Merry and Pippin again and slung them on their backs. Then the troops started off. Hour after hour they ran, pausing now and again only to sling the hobbits to fresh carriers, either because they were quicker and hardier or because of some plan of Grishnak. The Isengarders gradually passed through the orcs of Mordor, and Grishnak folk closed in behind. Soon they were gaining also on the northerners ahead. The forest began to draw nearer. Pippin was bruised and torn, his aching head was grated by the filthy jowl in the hairy ear of the orc that held him. Immediately in front were bow backs and tough thick legs going up and down, unrest in as if they were made of wire and horn, beating out the nightmare seconds of an endless time. In the afternoon UK's troop overtook the northerners. They were flagging in the rays of the bright sun, winter sun shining in a pale cool sky, though it was their heads were down and their tongues rolling out. The Isengarders, the whiteskins will catch you and me, you they coming. A cry from Grishnak showed that this was not mere jest. Horsemen riding very swiftly had indeed been sighted, still far behind, but gaining on the orcs, gaining on them like a tide over the flats on folk straying in a quicksand. The Isengarders began to run with a redoubled pace that astonished Pippin. A terrific spurt it seemed for the end of a race. Then he saw that the sun was sinking, falling behind the misty mountains. Shadows reached over the land. The soldiers of Mordor lifted their heads and also began to put on speed. The forest was dark and close already. They had passed a few outlying trees. The land was beginning to slope upwards ever more steeply, but the orcs did not halt. Both Ugik and Grishnak shouted, spurring them on to a last effort. They will make it yet, he will escape, thought Pippin, and then he managed to twist his neck so as to glance back. With one eye over his shoulder he saw that riders away eastward, already level with the orcs, galloping over the plain. The sunset gilded their spears and helmets and glinted in their pale flowing hair. They were hemming the orcs in, preventing them from scattering and driving them along the line of the river. He wondered very much what kind of folk they were. He wished now that he had learned more in Rivendell and looked more at maps and things, but in those days the plans of their journey seemed to be in more competent hands, and he had never reckoned with being cut off from G or from Stree and even from Frodo. All that he could remember about Rohan was that Gandalf's horse Shadowax had come from that land. That sounded hopeful as far as it went, but how will they know that we are not orcs, he thought. I don't suppose we've ever heard of hobbits down here. I suppose I ought to be glad that the Bast-El orcs look like being destroyed. I would rather be saved myself. The chances were that he and Merry would be killed together with their captors before ever the men of Rohan were aware of them. A few of the riders appeared to be bowmen skilled at shooting from a running horse. Riding swiftly into range they shot arrows at the orcs that straggled behind, and several of them Fell then the riders wheeled away out of the range of the answering bows of their enemies, who shot wildly, not daring to halt. This happened many times, and on one occasion arrows fell among the Isengardens. One of them just in front of Pippin stumbled and did not get up again. Night came down without the riders closing in for battle. Many orcs had fallen, but fully 200 remained. In the early darkness the orcs came to a hillock. The eaves of the forest were very near, probably no more than 3 furlongs away, but they could go no further. The horsemen had encircled a small band, disobeyed UK's command and ran towards the forest. Only 3 returned. Well, here we are, Grishnak, fine leadership. I hope the great Ugluk will lead us out again. Put those hings down, ordered Ugluk, taking no notice of Grishnak. You lug do get 2 others and strand guard over them. They are not to be killed unless the filthy white skins break through. Understand, as long as I'm alive I want them. They are not to cry out and they are not to be rescued. B. Their legs. The last part of the order was carried out mercilessly, but Pippin found that for the first time was close to Merry. The orcs were making a great deal of noise, shouting and clashing their weapons, and the hobbits managed to whisper together for a while. I don't think much of this, said Merry. The first feel nearly done in. I don't think I could crawl away far even if I was free. Lambus, whisper Pippin, I've got some. Have you? I don't think they've taken anything but our swords. Yes, I had a packet in my pocket, answered Merry, but it must be better to crumbs anyway. I can't put my mouth in my pocket. You won't have to. But just then a savage kick warned Pippin that the noise died down and the guards were watching. The night was cold and still. All around the knoll on which the orcs were gathered little watchfires sprang up, golden red in the darkness, a complete ring of them. They were within longbow shot, but the riders did not show themselves against the light, and the orcs wasted many arrows shooting at the fires until Ugluk stopped them. The riders made no sound. Later in the night, when the moon came out of the mist, then occasionally they could be seen shadowy shapes that glinted now and again in the white light as they moved in ceaseless patrol. They wait for the sun curs them, growled one of the guards. Why don't we get together and charge through? What old Ugl think he's doing? I should like to know. I dare say you would, snarled Ugl, stepping up from behind, meaning I don't think at all. I curse you, you're as bad as the other rabble, the maggots and the apes of the LBS. No good, try to charge with them, they'll just squeal and boat, and there are more than enough of these filthy horse boys to mop up our lot on the flat. There's only one thing those maggots can do: they can see like gimlets in the dark, but these white skins have better night eyes than most men from what I've heard, and don't forget their horses, they can see the night breeze, or so it's said. Still, there's one thing the fine fellows don't know: Mordor and his lads are in the forest and they'll show up at time. Now Ugly's words were enough apparently to 202-33 satisfy the Isengarders, but the other orcs were both despite and rebellious. They posted a few watchers, but most of them lay on the ground resting in the pleasant darkness. It did indeed become very dark again, for the moon passed westward into thick cloud and Pippin could not see anything a few feet away. The fires brought no light to the hillock. The riders were not, however, content merely to wait for the dawn and let their enemies rest. A sudden outcry on the east side of the knoll showed that something was wrong. It seemed that some of the men had ridden in close, slipped off their horses, crawled to the edge of the camp and killed several orcs, and then had faded away again. Ugluk dashed off to stop a stampede. Pippin and Merry sat up their guards. Isengarders had gone with Ugluk, but if the hobbits had any thought of escape, it was soon dashed. A long hairy arm took each of them by the neck and drew them close together. Dimly they were aware of Grishnak's great head and hideous face between them. His foul breath was on their cheeks. He began to pour them and Feel them, Pippin shuddered as hard cold fingers broke down his back. Well, my little one, said Grishnak in a soft whisper, enjoying your nice rest or not? I were a little awkwardly placed, perhaps was whips on one side and nasty spears on the other. Little people should not meddle in affairs that are too big for them. His fingers continued to grope. There was a light like a pale but hot fire between his eyes. The thought came suddenly into Pippin's mind as if caught direct from the urgent thought of his enemy. CRN knows about the ring. He's looking for it while Ugluk is busy. He probably wants it for himself. Cold fear was in Pippin's heart, yet at the same time he was wondering what use he could make of Grishnak's desire. I don't think you'll find it that way, he whispered. It isn't easy to find it, said Grishnak. His fingers stopped crawling and gripped Pippin's shoulder. Find war? What are you talking about, little one? For a moment Pippin was silent, then suddenly in the darkness he made a noise in his throat. Gollum, Gollum, nothing, my precious, he added. The hobbits felt Gok's fingers twitch. Is the goblin softly. That's what he means, is it? Oh, very, very dangerous, my little ones. Perhaps, said Mary, now alert and aware of Pippin's guess. Perhaps, and not only for us. Still, you know your own business best. Do you want it or not, and what would you give for it? Do I want it? Do I want it? said Grishnak as if puzzled, but his arms were trembling. What would I give for it? What do you mean? We mean, said Pippin, choosing his words carefully, that it's no good grouping in the dark. We could have saved you time and trouble, but you must untie our legs first or we'll do nothing and say nothing. My dear tender little fools, is Grishnak. Everything you have and everything you know will be got out of you into your time. Everything you wish. There was more that could tell to satisfy the questioner. Indeed you will quite soon. We shall hurry the inquiry. Oh dear no. What do you think you've been kept alive for, my dear little fellows? Please believe me when I say that it was not out of kindness, and not even one of UK's faults. I find it quite easy to believe, said Mary, but you haven't got your prey home yet, and it doesn't seem to be going your way. Whatever happens, if we come to Isengard, it won't be the great Grishnak that benefits. Saruman will take all that he can find. If you want anything for yourself, now's the time to do a deal. Gollum, Gollum, said Pippin. Onto your legs, said Mary. They felt the orc's arms trembling violently. Curse you, you filthy wom, he hissed. Onto your legs. I'll don't die every string in your body's hood. Do you think I can search you to the bones? Search you, I'll cut you both into quivering shreds. I don't need the help of your legs to get you away and have you all to myself. Suddenly he seized them. The strength in his long arms and shoulders was terrifying, and he tucked them one under each armpit and crushed them fiercely into his sides. A great stifling hand was clapped over each of their mouths. Then he sprang forward, stooping low. Quickly and silently he went until he came to the edge of the end. There, choosing a gap between the watches, he passed like an evil shadow out into the night, down the slope and away westward towards the river that flowed out of the forest. In that direction there was a wide open space with only one fire. After going a dozen yards he halted, peering and listening. Nothing could be seen or heard. He crept slowly on, bent almost double. Then he squatted and listened again. Then he stood up as if to risk a sudden dash. At that very moment the dark form of a rider loomed up right in front of him. A horse snorted and reared. A man called out, "Gist!" flung himself on the ground flat, dragging the hobbits under him. Then he drew his sword. No doubt he meant to kill his captives rather than allow them to escape or to be rescued, but it was his undoing. The sword rang faintly and glinted a little in the light of the fire. Away to his left an arrow came whistling out of the gloom. It was aimed with skill or guided by and it pierced his right hand. He dropped the sword and shrieked. There was a quick beat of hoofs, and even as Grishnak leapt up and ran he was ridden down and the spear passed through him. He gave a hideous shivering cry. Still the Hobbits remained flat on the ground as Gok had left them. Another horseman came riding swiftly to his comrade's aid, whether because of some special keenness of sight or because of some other sense. The horse lifted and sprang lightly over them, but its rider did not see them, lying covered in their elven cloaks, too crushed for the moment and too afraid to move. At last Merry stirred and whispered softly, "So far so good, but how are we to avoid being spit at?" The answer came almost immediately. The cries of Grishnak had roused the orcs from the yells and screeches that came from the knoll. The hobbits guessed that their disappearance had been discovered. Ugluk was probably knocking off a few more heads. Then suddenly the answering cries of orc voices came from the right, outside the circle of watchfires, from the direction of the forest and the mountains. Mahu had apparently arrived and was attacking the besiegers. There was the sound of galloping horses. The riders were drawing in their ring clothes around the north, risking the orc arrows so as to prevent any saute while a company rode off to deal with the newcomers. Suddenly Merry and Pippin realized that without moving they were now outside the circle. There was nothing between them and escape now, said Merry. If only we had our legs and hands free we might get away, but I can't touch the knots, I can't bite them. No need to try, said Pippin. I was going to tell you I've managed to free my hands. These loops are only left for sure. You better have a bit of lambers first. He slipped the cords off his wrists and fished out a packet. The cakes were broken but good still in their leaf wrappings. The hobbits each ate 2 or 3 pieces. The taste brought back to them the memory of fair faces and laughter and wholesome food in quiet days now far away. For a while they ate thoughtfully, sitting in the dark, heedless of the cries and sounds of battle nearby. Pippin was the first to come back to the present. We must be off, he said. Half a moment. Grishnak's sword was lying close at hand, but it was too heavy and clumsy for him to use, so he crawled forward and, finding the body of the goblin, he drew from its sheath a long sharp knife. With this he quickly cut their bonds. Now for it, he said, when we've warmed up a bit perhaps we shall be able to stand again and walk, but in many cases we had better start by crawling. They crawled. The turf was deep and yielding and that helped them, but it seemed a long and slow business. They gave the watchfire a wide berth and wormed their way forward bit by bit until they came to the edge of the river, gurgling away in the black shadows under its deep banks. Then they looked back. The sounds had died away. Evidently Moor and his lads had been killed or driven off. The riders had returned to their silent, ominous vigil. It would not last very much longer. Already the night was old in the east, which had remained unclouded. The sky was beginning to grow pale. We must get under cover, said Pio. We shall be seen. It will not be any comfort to us if these riders discover that we are not orcs after we are dead. He got up and stamped his feet. Those cords have cut me like wires, but my feet are getting warm again. I should take it home now. What about you, Merry? Merry got up. Yes, he said, I can manage it. Lambus does put some heart in you, a more home sort of feeling too than the heart of that orc drawl. I wonder what it was made of. Better not now, I expect. Let's get a drink of water and to wash away the thought of it. Not here, the banks are too steep, said Pippin. Forward now. They turned and walked side by side slowly along the line of the river behind them. The light grew in the east. As they walked they compared notes, talking lightly in hobbit fashion of the things that had happened since their capture. No listener would have guessed from their words that they had suffered cruelly and been in dire peril, going without hope towards torment and death. All that even now, as they knew well, they had little chance of ever finding friend or safety again. Oh, you seem to have been doing well, Master Tuuk, said Merry. You'll get almost a chapter in old Bilbo's book if ever I get the chance to report to him. Good work, especially guessing that hairy villain's little gang and plying up to him, but I wonder if anyone will ever pick up your trail and find that Br. I should hate to lose mine, but I'm afraid yours is gone for good. Oh, I shall have to brush up my toes if I am ever to get level with you. Indeed, cousin Brandib is going in front now. This is where he comes in. I don't suppose you have much notion where we are, but I spent my time at Rivendell rather better. We are walking west along the Anish. The butt end of the Misty Mountains is in front and Fangor in forest. Even as he spoke, the dark edge of the forest loomed up straight before them. Night seemed to have taken refuge under its great trees, creeping away from the coming dawn. Lead on, Master Brandib, said Pippin, or lead back. We have been warned against Fangorn, but one so knowing will not have forgotten that. I have not, answered Merry, but the forest seems better to me all the same. Then turning back into the middle of a battle, he led the way in under the huge branches of the trees. Old beyond guessing, they seemed great trailing beards of lion hung from them, blowing and swaying in the breeze. Out of the shadows the hobbits peeped, gazing back down the slope, little furtive figures that in the dim light looked like elf children in the deeps of time, peering out of the wildwood in wonder at their first dawn. Far over the great river and the brown lands, leagues upon leagues away, the dawn came red as flame. Loud rang the hunting horns to greet it. The riders of Rohan sprang suddenly to life. Horn answered horn again. Merry and Pippin heard clear in the cold air the neighing of war horses and the sudden singing of many men. The sun's limb was lifted, an arc of fire above the margin of the world. Then with a great cry the riders charged from the east. The red light gleamed on mail and spear. The orcs yelled and shot all the arrows that remained to them. The hobbits saw several horsemen fall, but their line held up on the hill, and over it and wheeled round and charged again. Most of the raiders that were left alive then broke and fled this way and that, pursued one by one to the death. But one band, holding together in a black wedge, drove forward resolutely in the direction of the forest. Straight up the slope they charged towards the watchers. Now they were drawing near, and it seemed certain that they would escape. They had already hewn down the 3 riders that barred their way. We have watched too long, said Merry. There's Ugluk, I don't want to meet him again. The hobbits turned and fled deep into the shadows of the wood. So it was that they did not see the last stand when Ugluk was overtaken and brought to bay at the very edge of Fangon. There he was slain at last by Aam, the 3rd Marshal of the Mark, who dismounted and fought him sword to sword. And over the wide fields the keen-eyed riders hunted down the few orcs that had escaped and still had strength to fly. Then when they had laid their fallen comrades in a mound and had sung their praises, the riders made a great fire and scattered the ashes of their enemies. So ended the raid, and no news of it came ever back to either Mordor or Isengard. But the smoke of the burning rose high to heaven and was seen by many watchful eyes. Meanwhile the hobbits went with as much speed as the dark and tangled forest allowed, following the line of the running stream westward and up towards the slopes of the mountains, deeper and deeper into Fangorn. Slowly their fear of the orcs died away and their pace slackened. A queer stifling feeling came over them, as if the air were too thin or too scanty for breathing. At last Merry halted. We can't go on like this, he panted. I want some air. Let's have a drink at any rate, said Pippin. I'm parched. He clambered onto a great tree root that wound down into the stream, and stooping drew up some water in his said hands. It was clear and cold, and he took many draughts. Merry followed him. The water refreshed him and seemed to cheer their hearts. For a while they sat together on the brink of the stream, dabbling their sore feet and legs and peering around at the trees that stood silently about them, rank upon rank, until they faded away into grey twilight in every direction. I suppose you haven't lost us already, said Pippin, leaning back against the great tree trunk. We can at least follow the course of the stream. the Anish or whatever you call it, and get out again the way we could if our legs would do it, said Mary, and if we could breathe properly. Yes, it is all very dim and stuffy in here, said Pippin. Reminds me somehow the old room in the great place of the Tes way back in the Smiles in Toaru, a huge place where the furniture has never been moved or changed for generations. They say the old T lived in it year after year while he and the room got older and shaver together. It has never been changed since he died a century ago. And old Gerontius was my great-great-grandfather. That puts it back a bit, but that is nothing to the old feeling of this wood. Look at all those weeping thrilling beards and whiskers of lion, and most of the trees seem to be half covered with ragged dry leaves that have never fallen and tidy. I can't imagine what spring would be like here if it ever comes. Still spring cleaning, but the sun at any rate must peep in sometimes, said Mary. It does not look or feel at all like Bilbo's description of Mirewood. Well, that was a dark and black. In the home of dark black things, this is just dim and frightfully tree is. You can't imagine animals living here at all or staying for long. No hobbits, said Pippin, and I don't like the thought of trying to get through either. Nothing to eat for 100 miles, I should guess. How would I said Mary. We ran off with nothing but a couple of spare buckets of lambus and left everything else behind. They looked at what remained of the elven cakes, broken fragments, for about 5 mere days. That was all. And not a wrap or blanket, said Mary. We shall be cold tonight. Whichever way we go, I'll be better the sign of the way now, said Pippin. The morning must be getting on. Just then they became aware of a yellow light that had appeared some way further on into the wood. Shafts of sunlight seemed suddenly to have pierced the forest roof. Hello, said Mary. The sun must have run into a cloud while we've been under these trees. Oh, and now she has run out again, or else she was climbed high enough to look down through some opening. It isn't far. Let's go and investigate. They found it was further than they thought. The ground was rising steeply still, and it was because increasingly stony. The light grew broader as they went on, and soon they saw that there was a rock wall before them, the side of a hill or the abrupt end of some long route thrust out by the distant mountains. No trees grew on it, and the sun was falling full on its stony face. The twigs of the trees and its foot were stretched out stiff and still, as if reaching out to the warmth where all had looked so shabby and grey before. The wood now gleamed with rich bright sounds, and with the smooth black greys of bark like polished leather. The boughs of the trees glowed with a soft green like young grass. Early spring, or a fleeting vision of it, was about them. In the face of the stony wall there was something like a stair, natural perhaps, and made by the weathering and splitting of the rock, for it was rough and uneven. High up, almost level with the tops of forest trees, there was a shelf under a cliff. Nothing grew there but a few grasses and weeds at its edge, and one old stump of a tree with only 2 bent branches left. It looked almost like the figure of some gnarled old man standing there, blinking in the morning light. Up we go, said Mary joyfully. Now for a breath of fresh air in the sight of the land. They climbed and scrambled up the rock. If the stair had been made, it was for bigger feet and longer legs than theirs. They were too eager to be surprised at the remarkable way in which the cuts and saws of their captivity had healed and their vigor had returned. They came at length to the edge of the shelf, almost at the feet of the old stump. Then they sprang up and turned around with their backs to the hill, breathing deep and looking out westward. They saw that they had only come some 3 or 4 miles into the forest. The heads of the trees marched down the slopes towards the plain. There, near the fringe of the forest, tall spires of curling black smoke went up, wavering and floating towards them. The wind's changing, said Mary. It's turned east again. It feels cool up here. Yes, said Pippin. I'm afraid this is only a passing gleam and it will go grey again. What a pity this shaggy old forest looks so different in the sunlight. I almost felt I liked the place. I almost felt you liked the forest. That's good. That's uncommonly kind of you, said a strange voice. Turn around and let me have a look at your faces. I almost feel that I dislike you both, but don't let us be hasty. Turn around. A large knob-knuckled hand was laid on each of their shoulders, and they were twisted round gently but irresistibly. Then 2 great arms lifted them up. They found that They were looking at the most extraordinary face. It belonged to a large man-like, almost troll-like figure, at least 14 feet high, very sturdy, with a tall head and hardly any neck. Whether it was clad in stuff like green and grey bark, or whether that was its hide, was difficult to say. At any rate, the arms at a short distance from the trunk were not wrinkled but covered with a brown smooth skin. The large feet had 7 toes each. The lower part of the long face was covered with a sweeping grey beard, bushy, almost twiggy at the roots, thin and mossy at the ends. But at the moment the hobbits noted little but the eyes. These deep eyes were now surveying them, slow and solemn but very penetrating. They were brown, shot with a green light. Often afterwards Pippin tried to describe his first impression of them. One felt as if there was an enormous weight behind them, filled up with ages of memory and long, slow, steady thinking, but their surface was sparkling with the present, like sun shimmering on the ouch leaves of a vast tree or on the ripples of a very deep lake. I don't know, but it felt as if something that grew in the ground, asleep you might say, or just a feeling itself, as something between root tip and leaf tip, between deep earth and sky, had suddenly waked up and was considering you with the same slow care that it had given to its own inside affairs for endless years. The voice, a deep voice like a very deep woodwind instrument, very odd indeed. Do not be hasty, that is my motto. But if I had seen you before I heard your voices, I like them. Nice little voices. They reminded me of something I cannot remember. If I had seen you before I heard you, I should have just chen on you, taking you for the clocks, and found out my mistake afterwards. Very odd you are indeed, root and twig, very odd. Pippin, though still amazed, no longer felt afraid under those eyes. He felt a curious suspense, but not fear. Please, he said, who are you and what are you? A queer look came into the old eyes, a kind of weariness. The deep wells were covered over. Now outed the voice, well, I am an or that is what they called me. Yes, and is the word the and I am you might say in your manner of speaking. Fangr is my name, according to some Treebeard, others make it Treebeard will do. An end, said Merry. What's that? But what do you call yourself? What's your real name? Who now? Replied Treeby. Oh, now that would be telling. Not so hasty, and I am doing the asking. You are in my country. What are you? I wonder. I cannot place you. You do not seem to come in the old list that I learned when I was young, but that was a long, long time ago. They may have made new lists. Let me see how they did go now. The L of living creatures. First name the four of free people's eldest of all the elf children, dwarf the delver, dark houses and the earth-born, old as mountains, man the mortal, master of horses, E the builder, buck the leaper, bear be hunter for the fighter, hound is hungry, hare is fearful, eagle in airy, ox in pasture, heartened, crowned, HK is swiftest, SW the whitest, serpent coldest. How did it go? It was a long list, but anyway you do not seem to fit in anywhere. We always seem to have got left out of the old lists and the old stories, said Mary. Yeah, we've been about for quite a long time. We're hobbits. Why not make a new line, said Pippin. Half-grown hobbits, the hole dwellers, put us amongst the four next to man the big people, and you've got it. Not bad, said Treebeard. That would do. So you live in holes. Sounds very right and proper. Who calls you hobbits, though? That does not sish to me. Elves made all the old words. They began it. Nobody else calls us hobbits. We call ourselves that, said Pippin. Oh, come now, not so hasty. You call yourselves hobbits, but you should not go telling just anybody. You'll be letting out your own right names if you're not careful. Oh, we aren't careful about that, said Mary. As a matter of fact, I'm Brandib, Maria do Brandib. The most people call me just Mary, and I'm A.T. Perig T, but I'm generally called Pippin or even Pip H. But you are hasty folk, I see, said Treebeard. I am honored by your confidence, but you should not be too free, or at once there are ends and ends, you know, or there are ends, things that look like K, but and, as you might say. I'll call you Mary and Pippin, if you please. Nice names, for I am not going to tell you my name, not yet at any rate. A queer, half-knowing, half-humorous look came with a green flicker into his eyes. For one thing, it would take a long while. My name is growing all the time, and I've lived a very long time, so my name is like a story. Real names tell you the story of the things they belong to. In my Language in the old VSH, as you might say, it is a very lovely language, but it takes a very long time to say anything in it, because we do not say anything in it unless it is worth taking a long time to say and to listen to. But now, and the eyes became very bright and present, seeming to grow smaller and almost sharp. What is going on, and what are you doing in it? All I can see and hear and smell and feel a great deal from this. Excuse me, that is a part of my name for it. I do not know what the word is in the outside languages, you know, the thing that we are on when I stand and look out from fine mornings and think about the sun and the grass beyond the wood and the horses and the clouds and the unfolding of the world. What is going on? What is Gandalf up to? And these, he made a deep rumbling noise like a discord on a great old these oars and young sand down at Isengard. I like El, but not too quick now. There is quite a lot going on, said Mary, and even if we tried to be quick it would take a long time to tell. But you told us not to be hasty. Ought we to tell you anything so soon? Would you think it rude if we asked what you were going to do with us and which side you are on? And did you know Gondal? Yes, I do know him, the only wizard that really cares about trees. A tree? Do you know him? Yes, said Pippin sadly, we did. He was a great friend and he was our guide. Then I can answer your other questions. A tree beard? I am not going to do anything with you. Not if you mean by that do something to you without your leave. We might do some things together. I don't know about sides. I go my own way, but your way may go along with mine for a while. But you speak of Master Gandalf as if he was in a story that had come to an end. Yes, we do, said Pippin sadly. The story seems to be going on, but I'm afraid that Gandalf has fallen out of it. Come now, said Tree Music Beard. Well, he paused, looking long at the hobbits. Well, I do not know what to say. Come now, if you would like to hear more, said Mary, we will tell you, but it will take some time. Wouldn't you like to put us down? Couldn't we sit here together in the sun while it lasts? You must be getting tired of holding us up. Tired? No, I am not tired. I do not easily get tired, and I do not sit down. I am not very vendible, but there, the sun is going in. Let us leave this. Did you say what you call it? A hill, suggested Pippin. Shelf step, suggested Martrade, repeated the words thoughtfully. Yes, that was it, but it is a hasty word for a thing that has stood here ever since this part of the world was shaped. Never mind, let us leave it and go. Where shall we go? asked Barry. Oh, to my home, or one of my homes, answered Treebeard. Is it far? I do not know. You might call it far perhaps, but what does that matter? Well, you see, we have lost all our belongings, said Mary. We have only a little food. Oh, you need not trouble about that, said Treebeard. I can give you a drink that will keep you green and growing for a long, long while, and if we decide to part company, I can set you down outside my country at any point you choose. Let us go. Holding the hobbits gently but firmly, one in the crook of each arm, Treebird lifted up first one large foot, then the other, and move them to the edge of the shelf. The root-like toes grasped the rocks, then carefully and solemnly he walked down from step to step and reached the floor of a forest. At once he set off with long deliberate stride through the trees, deeper and deeper into the wood, never far from the stream, climbing steadily up towards the slopes of the mountains. Many of the trees seemed asleep or as unaware of him as of any other creature that merely passed by, but some quivered and some raised up their branches above his head as he approached. All the while as he walked he talked to himself in a long running stream of musical sounds. The hobbits were silent for some time. They felt oddly enough safe and comfortable, and they had a great deal to think and wonder about. At last Pippin ventured to speak again. Please try it, he said. Could I ask you something? Why did Cabor warn us against your forest? He told us not to risk getting entangled in it. Did now, rumbled Treebeard, and I might have said much the same if you had been going the other way. Do not risk getting entangled in the woods of Lor and Lindor. and that is what the elves used to call it, but now they make the name shorter. Loran they call it. Perhaps they are right, maybe it is fading, not growing land of the valley of sinking gold that was it once upon a time. Now it is dream flower. Ah well, but it is a queer place and not for just anyone to venture in. I am surprised that you have got out, but much more surprised that you ever got in. That has not happened to strangers for many a year. It is a queer land, and so is this folk have come to grief here. They have come to grief, he hummed to himself. They are folding rather behind the world in the I guess, he said. Neither this country nor anything else outside the golden wood is what it was when Kyon was young. Still, that is what they used to say. Things have changed, but it is still true in places. What do you mean, said Pippin. What is true? The trees and the end, said Treebeard. I do not understand all that goes on myself, so I cannot explain it to you. Some of us are still true and lively enough in our fashion, but many are growing sleepy, growing tree as you might say. Most of the trees are just trees, of course, but many are half awake, some are quite wide awake, and few are getting enish. That is going on all the time. When that happens to a tree, you find that some have bad hearts, nothing to do with their wood. I do not mean that. Why, I knew some good old willows down the Antwash gone long ago. Alas, they were quite hollow indeed. They were falling all to pieces, but as quiet and sweet-spoken as a young leaf. And then there are some trees in the valleys under the mountains, sound as a bell and bad right through. That sort of thing seems to spread. There used to be some very dangerous parts in this country. There are still some very black patches like the old forest away to the north. Do you mean, asked Barry. I something like, but much worse. I do not doubt there is some shadow of the great darkness lying there still away north, and bad memories are handed down, but there are hollow tales in this land where the darkness has never been lifted and the trees are older than I am. Still, we do what we can. We keep off strangers and the foolhardy. We train and we teach. We walk and we weed. We are tree herds. We old and few enough of us are left now. Sheep get like shepherd and shepherds like sheep. It is said are slow reel and neither have long. The world it is quicker and closer with trees and hence, and they walk down the ages together for and are more like ears, less interested in themselves than men are, and better at getting inside other things yet again, and some whole like men, more changeable than elves are, and quicker at taking the color of the outside, you might say, or better than both, for they are steadier and keep their minds on things longer. Some of my king look just like trees now and need something great to rouse them, and they speak only in whispers, but some of my trees a limb life, and many can talk to me. Elves began it, of course, waking trees up and teaching them to speak and learning their tree talk. They always wished to talk to everything, the old elves did, but then the great darkness came and they passed away over the sea or fled into the far valleys and hid themselves and made songs about day that would never come again, never again. Why, hi, there was all one wood once upon a time from here to the mountains of Lon, and this was just the east end. Those were the broad days. Time was when I could walk and sing all day and hear no more, and the echo of my own voice in the hollow hill. The woods were like the woods of Lothlorien, only thicker, stronger, younger, and the smell of the air I used to spend a week just breathing. Treebeard fell silent, striding along and yet making hardly a sound with his great feet. Then he began to hum again and passed into a murmuring chant. Gradually the hobbits became aware that he was chanting to them in the willow beads of Tazar Nan. I walked in the spring, the sight and smell of spring Naran, and I said that it was good. I wandered in summer in the elm woods of Oyen, the lights and the music in the sum by the 7 rivers of War, and I thought that was best. To the beaches of Lorth I came in the autumn, the gold and the red and the sighing of leaves in the autumn, and out Anil Lord, it was more than my desire. To the pine trees upon the island of Dorthonion I climbed in the winter, the wind and the whiteness and the black branches of winter upon Euron my voice went up and sang in the sky, and now all those lands lie under the wave, and I in Amarona Ina in Elal my own, in the country of Fangor where the roots are long and the earsly thicker than the leaves in. He ended and strode on silently, and In all the wood is as far as ear could reach there was not a sound. The day waned and dusk was twined about the boughs of the trees. At last the hobbits saw rising dimly before them a steep dark land. They had come to the feet of the mountains and to the green roots of tea method down the hillsides. The young Anish leaping from its springs high above ran noisily from step to step to meet them. On the right of the stream there was a long slope clad with grass now grey and the twilight. No trees grew there, and it was open to the sky. Stars were shining already in lakes between shores of cloud. Tree-bid strode up the slope hardly slackening his pace. Suddenly before them the hobbits saw a wide opening. Two great trees stood there, one on either side like living gate-posts, but there was no gate save their crossing and interwoven boughs. As the old end approached the trees lifted up their branches and all their leaves quivered and rustled, for they were evergreen trees and their leaves were dark and polished and gleamed in the twilight. Beyond them was a wide, level space as though the floor of a great hole had been cut in the side of the hill. On either hand the walls sloped upwards until they were 50 feet high or more, and along each wall stood an aisle of trees that also increased in height as they marched inwards. At the far end the rock wall was sheer, but at the bottom it had been hollowed back into a shallow bay with an arched roof, the only roof of the hall save the branches of the trees which at the inner end overshadowed all the ground, leaving only a broad open path in the middle. A little stream escaped from the springs above and leaving the main water fell tinkling down the sheer face of the wall, pouring in silver drops like a fine curtain in front of the arched bay. The water was gathered again into a stone basin in the floor between the trees and fence. It spilled and flowed away beside the open path out to rejoin the Entwash in its journey through the forest. Here we are, said Treebeard, breaking his long silence. I have brought you about 70,000 strides, but what that comes to in the measurement of your land I do not know. Anyhow we are near the roots of the last mountain. Part of the name of this place might be Welling Hall if it were turned into your language. I like it. We will stay here tonight. He set them down on the grass between the aisles of the trees and they followed him towards the great arch. The hobbits now noticed that as he walked his knees hardly bent but his legs opened with a great stride. He planted his big toes, and they were indeed big and very broad on the ground first before any other part of his feet. For a moment Beard stood under the rain of the falling spring and took a deep breath. Then he laughed and passed inside. A great stone table stood there, but no chairs at the back of the bay. It was already quite dark. Treebeard lifted two great vessels and stood them on the table. They seemed to be filled with water, but he held his hands over them and immediately they began to glow, one with a golden and the other with a rich green light, and the blending of the two lights lit the bay as if the sun of summer was shining through a roof of young leaves. Looking back the hobbit saw that the trees in the court had also begun to glow, faintly at first but steadily quickening until every leaf was edged with light, some green, some gold, some red as copper, while the tree trunks looked like pillars molded out of luminous stone. Well, now we can talk again, said Treebeard. You are thirsty, I expect. Perhaps you are also too tired. Drink these. He went to the back of the bay and then they saw that several tall stone jars stood there with heavy lids. He removed one of the lids and ripped in a great label, and with it filled 3 bows, one very large bow and 2 smaller ones. This is an empty house, he said, and there are no seats, I fear, but you may sit on the table. Picking up the hobbits he set them on the great stone slab 6 feet above the ground, and there they sat dangling their legs and drinking in sips. The drink was like water, indeed very like the taste of draughts that they had drunk from the Entwash near the borders of the forest, and yet there was some scent or essay in it which they could not describe. It was faint, but it reminded them of the smell of a distant wood borne from far away by a cool breeze at night. The effect of the draught began at the toes and rose steadily through every limb, bringing refreshment and vigor as it ceded upwards right to the tips of the hair. Indeed, the hobbits felt that the hair on their heads was actually standing up, waving and curling and growing. As for Treebeard, he first laid his feet in the basin beyond the arch and then he drained his bowl at one draw, one long slow draw. The hobbits thought he would never stop. At last he set the bow down again. He sighed, now we can talk easier. You can sit on the floor and I will lie down. That will prevent this drink from rising to my head and sending me to sleep. On the right side of the bay there was a great bed on low legs not more than a couple of feet high, covered deep in dried grass and bracken. Treebeard lowered himself slowly onto this with only the slightest sign of bending at his middle until he lay at full length with his arms behind his head, looking up at the ceiling, upon which lights were flickering like the play of leaves in the sunshine. Merry and Pippin sat beside him on pillows of grass. Now tell me your tale and do not hurry, said Treebeard. The hobbits began to tell him the story of their adventures ever since they left Hobbiton. They followed no very clear order, for they interrupted another continually, and Treebeard often stopped the speaker and went back to some earlier point or jumped forward asking questions about later events. They said nothing whatever about the ring and did not tell him why they set out or where they were going to, and he did not ask for any reasons. He was immensely interested in everything, in the Black Riders in Elon and Rivendell, in the Old Forest and Tom Bombadil, in the mines of Moria and in Lothlorien and Gadriel. He made them describe the Shire and its country over and over again. He said, an odd thing at this point, you never see any here ends around there, do you? He asked. Well, not ends and wives I should really say, and said Pippin. Are they like you at all? Yes, well no, I do not really know now, said Treebeard thoughtfully, but they would like your country, so I just wondered. Treebeard was however especially interested in everything that concerned Gandalf, and most interested of all in Saruman's doings. The hobbits regretted very much that they knew so little about them, only a rather vague report by Sam of what Gadriel had told to the council, but they were clear at any rate that Ugluk and his troop came from Isengard and spoke of Saruman as their master, said Treebeard when at last their story had wound and wandered down. The battle of the orcs and the riders of Rohan. Well, that is a bundle of news and no mistake. You have not told me all, no indeed, not by long way, but I do not doubt that you are doing as Scandal would wish. There is something very big going on that I can see, and what it is maybe I shall learn in good time or in bad time by root and twig, but it is a strange business. Ups sprout a little folk that are not of the old lists, and behold the 9 forgotten riders reappear to hunt them, and Gandalf takes them on a great journey, and Gadriel harbors them in Carscalan, and orcs pursue them down all the leagues of Wilderland. Indeed, they seem to be caught up in a great storm. I hope they weather it. And what about yourself, asked Barry. I have not troubled about the great wars, said Treebeard. They mostly concern elves and men. That is the business of wizards. Wizards are always troubled about the future. I do not like worrying about the future. I am not altogether on anybody's side, because nobody is altogether on my side, if you understand me. Nobody cares for the woods as I care for them, not even elves nowadays. Still, I take more kindly to elves than to others. It was the elves that cured us of dumbness long ago, and that was a great gift that cannot be forgotten, though our ways have parted since, and there are some things of course whose side I am altogether not on. I am against them altogether. These, he again made a deep rumble of disgust, these orcs and their masters. I used to be anxious when the shadow lay on Milkwood, but when it removed to Mordor I did no trouble for a while. Mordor is a long way away, but it seems that a wind is setting east, and the withering of all woods may be drawn near. There is not that an old end can do to hold back that storm. We must we it or crack not. Saruman now. Saruman is a neighbor. I cannot overlook him. I must do something. I suppose I have often wondered lately what I should do about Saruman. Who is Saruman, asked Pippin. Do you know anything about his history? San is a wizard, answered Treebeard. More than that I cannot say I do. Not know the story of wizards. They appeared first after the great ships came over the sea. If they came with the ships I never can tell. Schumann was reckoned great among them. I believe he gave up wandering about and minding the affairs of men and elves some time ago. You would call it a very long time ago, and he settled down at Angrenost Orengard, as the men of Rouen call it. He was very quiet to begin with, but his fame began to grow. He was chosen to be the head of the White Council, they say, but that did not turn out to. Well, I wonder now if even then Saruman was not turning to evil ways, but at any rate he used to give no trouble to his neighbors. I used to talk to him. There was a time when he was always walking about my woods. He was polite in those days, always asking my leave at least when he met me, and always eager to listen. I told him many things that he would never have found out by himself, but he never repaid me in like kind. I cannot remember that he ever told me nothing, and he got more and more like that. His face, as I remember it, I have not seen it for many a day, became like windows in a stone wall, windows with shutters inside. I think that I now understand what he is up to. He is plotting to become a power. He has a mind of metal and wheels, and he does not care for growing things except as far as they serve him for the moment. And now it is clear that he is a black traitor. He has tack up with the vow folk, with the orcs. Worse than that, he has been doing something to them, something dangerous, for these Isengarders are more like wicked men. It is a mark of evil things that came in the great darkness, that they cannot abide in the sun, but Salomon's oars can endure it even if they hate it. I wonder what he has done. Are they men that he has turned, or has he blended the races of orcs and men? And that would be a black evil. Treebeard rumbled for a moment as if he was pronouncing some deep subterranean entish malediction. Some time ago I began to wonder how orcs dared to pass through my woods so freely. He went on, only lately did I guess that Schumann was to blame, and that long ago he had been spying out all the ways and discovering my secrets. He and his foul folk are wreaking havoc now down on the borders. They are felling trees, good trees. Some of these trees they just cut down and leave to rot. Mischief that, but most are heat up and carried off to feed the fires of war. There is always a smoke rising from Isengard these days. Him root and branch. Many of those trees were my friends, creatures that I had known from nuts and acorn. Many had voices of their own that are lost forever now, and there are wastes of stump and bramble where once were singing groves. I have been idle, I have let things slip, it must stop. Treebeard raised himself from his bed with a jerk, stood up and thumped his hand on the table. The vessels of light trembled and sent up two jets of flame. There was a flicker like green fire in his eyes, and his beard stood out stiff as a great besom. I will stop it, he bombed, and you shall come with me. You may be able to help me. You will be helping your own friends that way too, for if San is not checked, Rohan and Gondo will have an enemy behind as well as in front. Our road go together to Eengard. We will come with you, said Merry. We will do what we can. Yes, said Pippin. I should like to see the White Hand overthrown. I should like to be there even if I could not be of much use, but I shall never forget you in the crossing of Rohan. Good, said Treebeard, but I spoke too hastily. We must not be hasty. I have become too hot. I must cool myself and think, for it is easier to shout stop than to do it. He strode to the archway and stood for some time under the folding rain of the spring. Then he laughed and shook himself, and wherever the drops of water fell glittering from him to the ground, they glinted like red and green sparks. He came back and laid himself on the bed again and was silent. After some time the hobbits heard him murmuring again. He seemed to be counting on his fingers. Hi, he sighed. The trouble is that there are so few of us left, he said, turning towards the hobbit. Only 3 of the first Ents that walked in the wood before the darkness, only myself, Fangon and Fing Lass and Fl Brief, to give them their Elish names. You may call them Leaflock and Skinbar if you like that better, and of us 3 Leaflock and Skinbar are not much use for this business. Leaflock has grown sleep almost tree, as you might say. He has taken to standing by himself half asleep all through the summer with the deep grass of the meadows, sir, his trees covered with leafy hair. He used to rouse up in winter, but of late he has been too drowsy to walk far. Even then Skinbar lived on the mountain slopes west of Isengard. That is where the worst trouble has been. He was wounded by the orcs, and many of his folk in his tree herds have been murdered and destroyed. He has gone up into the high places among the birches that he loves best, and he will not come down. Still, I dare say I could get together a fair company of our younger folks if I could make them understand the need, if I could rouse them. We are not a hasty folk. What a pity there are so few of us. Why are they so few when you have lived in this country so long? Asked Pippin. Have a great many died? Oh no, said Treeby, none have died from inside, as you might say. Some have fallen in the evil chances of the long years, of course, and more have grown tree, but there were never many of us, and we have not increased. There have been no endings, no children, you would say, not for a terrible long count of years. You see, we lost the end. Wise, how very sad, said Pippin. How was it that they all died? They did not die, said Treebeard. I never said died. We lost them, I said we lost them, and we cannot find them. He sighed. I thought most folk knew that there were songs about the hunt of the Ans for the Endwy sung among elves and men from Milkwood to Gondor. They cannot be quite forgotten. Well, I'm afraid the songs have not come west or over the mountains to the Sh, said Mary. Won't you tell us some more, or sing us some of the songs? Oh yes, I will indeed, said Treebeard, seeming pleased with the request, but I cannot tell it properly, only in short, and then we must end our talk tomorrow. We have councils to call and work to do, and maybe our journey to begin. It is rather a strange and sad story, he went on after a pause. When the world was young and the woods were wide and wild, the ants and the Endwives, and there were men maidens then. Ah, the loveliness of Phil of Warliam the light-footed. In the days of our youth they walked together and they housed together, but our hearts did not go on growing in the same way. The Ents gave their love to things that they met in the world, and the end TV their thought to other things, for the Ents love the great trees and the wild woods and the sloes of the hills, and they drank of the mountain streams and ate only such fruit as the trees let fall in their path, and they learned of the elves and spoke with the trees. The Enwives gave their minds to the lesser trees and to the meads in the sunshine beyond the feet of the forests, and they saw the sloe in the thicket and the wild apple and the cherry blossoming in spring and the green herbs in the waterland land in summer. Oh, in the seedling grasses in the autumn fields. They did not desire to speak with these things, but they wished them to hear and obey what was said to them. The Endwives ordered them to grow according to their wishes and bear leaf and fruit to their liking, for the Entwives desired order and plenty and peace, by which they meant that things should remain where they had set them. So the Entwives made gardens to live in, but we went on wandering, and we only came to the gardens now and again. Then when the darkness came in the north, the Entwives crossed the great river and made new gardens and tilled new fields, and we saw them more seldom. After the darkness was overthrown, the land of the Endwives blossomed richly, and their fields were full of corn. Many men learned the crafts of the Endives and honored them greatly, but we were only a legend to them, a secret in the heart of the forest. Yet here we still are, while all the gardens of the Endwives, how wasted! Men call them the brown lamps now. I remember it was long ago, in the time of the war between Sauron and the men of the Sea. Desire came over me to see Fimbriel again. Very fair she was still in my eyes when I had last seen her, though little like the End maiden of old, for the Ndwi lives were bent and brown by their labor, their hair parched by the sun to the hue of ripe corn, and their cheeks like red apples, yet their eyes were still the eyes of our own people. We crossed over Anduin and came to their land, but we found it desert. It was all burned and uprooted, for war had passed over it. But the Endwives were not there long. We called and long we searched, and we asked whole folk that we met which way the Hopes have gone. Some said they had never seen them, and some said that they had seen them walking away west, and some said east and others south, but nowhere that we went could we find them. Our sorrow was very great, yet the wildwood called and we returned to it. For many years we used to go out every now and again and look for the Endwives, walking far and wide, calling them by their beautiful names, but as time passed we went more seldom, and wandered less far, and now the Antives are only a memory for us, and our beards are long and grey. The arrows made many songs concerning the search of the ends, and some of the songs passed into the tongues of men, but we made no songs about it, being content to chant their beautiful names. When we thought of the end of lives, we believe that we may meet again in a time to come, and perhaps we shall find somewhere a land where we can live together and both be content, but it is for that will only be when we have both lost all that we now have, and it may well be that that time is drawing near at last, for if Sauron alone destroyed the gardens, the enemy today seems likely to wither all the woods. There was an elvish song that spoke of this, or at least so I understand it. It used to be sung up and down the great river. It was never an Elsh song, Maru. It would have been a very long song in Kish, but we know it by heart and har it now and again. This is how it runs in your tongue: when spring unfolds the beech and leave an s in the when light is all the wildwood stream and wind is on the brow when stride is long and breath is deep, and k the mountain air come back to me, and sa my land is fair, and the end y sings when spring is come to g field and is in the blade, when blossoms lie a shining snow is on the when shower and sun upon the earth with fragrance fill the air. Are linger here and will not come, because my land is, to which the end sings when summer lies upon the world, and in a moon of cold beneath the roof of sleeping leaves the dreams of trees unfood, when woodland halls are green and cool and wind is in the west. Come back to me, and say my land is best, and the end wife sings when summer wars are hanging fruit and burns the very brown, when stw is gold and here is white, and harvest comes to town, when honey spills and apples swells the wind will be the west. I linger here beneath the sun because my land is best. Then the end sings when winter comes the wind to wild that hill and wood shall slay when Trey shall fall, land's starless night devour the sunless day, when wi is in the deadly then in the bit rain. I look for thee and call to thee, I come to thee again, which the end wife sings when winter comes and singing ends, when darkness falls at last, when broken is the bar in and light and lab music past. I look for thee and wait for thee until we meet again. Together we will take the road beneath the bit rin, and then both sing together. We will take the road that leads into the west, and far away we'll find a land where both our hearts may rest. That is how it goes, he said. It is Elish, of course, light-hearted, quick-worded, and soon over. I dare say it is fair enough, but the Ents could say more on their side if they had time. But now I am going to stand up and take a little sleep. Where will you stand? We usually lie down to sleep, said Mary. We shall be all right where we are. Lie down to sleep, said Treebeard. Why, of course you do. I was forgetting. Singing that song put me in mind of old times. I almost thought that I was talking to young Ans. I did. Well, you can lie on the bed. I am going to stand in the rain. Good night. Merry and Pippin climbed onto the bed and curled up in the soft grass and fern. It was fresh and sweet-scented and warm. The lights died down and the glow of the trees faded, but outside under the arch they could see old Treebeard standing motionless with his arms raised above his head. The bright stars peered out of the sky and lit the falling water as it spilled onto his fingers and head and dripped in hundreds of silver drops onto his feet. Listening to the tinkling of the drops, the hobbits fell asleep. They woke to find a cool sun shining into the great court and onto the floor of the bay. Sheds of light cloud were overhead, running on a easterly wind. Treebeard was not to be seen, but while Merry and Pippin were bathing in the basin by the arch, they heard him humming and singing as he came up the path between the trees. Good morning, Mar and Pippin, he boomed when he saw them. You sleep long. I have been many and strides already today. Now we will have a drink and go to. And he poured them out 2 full bowls from a stone jar, but from a different jar. The taste was not the same as it had been the night before. It was earthier and richer, more sustaining and food-likey, so to speak, while the hobbits drank sitting on the edge of the bed and nibbling small pieces of elf cake, more because they felt that eating was a necessary part of breakfast than because they felt hungry. Treebeard stood humming in Entish or Elvish or some strange tongue and looking up at the sky. Where is in? Pippin ventured to Ask, and said Treebeard, turning around, it is not a place, it is a gathering of ends, which does not often happen nowadays, but I have managed to make a fair number promised to come. We shall meet in the place where we have always met. Dingle men call it, it is away south from here, we must be there before noon. Before long they set up. Tray carried the hobbits in his arms as on the previous day. At the entrance to the court he turned to the right, stepped over the stream, and strode away southwards along the feet of great tumble slopes, where trees were scant. Above these the hobbits saw thickets of birch and rowan, and beyond them dark and climbing pinewood. Soon Tree had turned a little away from the hills and plunged into deep groves, where the trees were larger, taller, and thicker than any that the hobbits had ever seen before. For a while they felt faintly the sense of stifling which they had noticed when they first ventured into Found, but it soon passed. Chia did not talk to them, he hummed to himself deeply and thoughtfully, but Merry and Pippin caught no proper words. It sounded like, and so on, with a constant change of note in rhythm. Now and again they thought they heard an answer, a hum or a quiver of sound that seemed to come out of the earth, all from boughs above their heads, or perhaps from the boughs of the trees. But Tribia did not stop or turn his head to either side. They had been gone for a long while. Pippin had tried to keep count of the end strides, but had failed, getting lost at about 3,000 when Treebeard began to slacken his pace. Suddenly he stopped, put the hobbits down, and raised his curled hands to his mouth so that they made a hollow tube. Then he blew or called through them. A great hum rang out like a deep-throated horn in the woods, and seemed to echo from the trees far off. There came from several directions a similar hum that was not an echo but an answer. Tray had now perched Merry and Pippin on his shoulders, and strode on again, every now and then sending out another horn call, and each time the answers came louder and nearer. In this way they came at last to what looked like an impenetrable wall of dark evergreen trees of a kind that the hobbits had never seen before. They branched out right from the roots and were densely clad in dark glossy leaves like thornless holly, and they bore many stiff upright flower spikes with large shining olive-colored buds. Turning to the left and skirting this huge hedge, Treebeard came in a few strides to a narrow entrance. Through it a worn path passed and dived suddenly down a long steep slope. The hobbits saw that they were descending into a great dingle almost as round as a bowl, very wide and deep, crowned at the rim with the high dark evergreen hedge. It was smooth and grass-clad inside, and there were no trees except 3 very tall and beautiful silver birches that stood at the bottom of the bowl. 2 other paths led down into the dingle from the west and from the east. Several ants had already arrived, more were coming in down the other paths, and some were now following Treebeard. As they drew near, the hobbits gazed at them. They had expected to see a number of creatures as much like Treebeard as one hobbit is like another, at any rate to a stranger's eye, and they were very much surprised to see nothing of the kind. The answer is as different from one another as trees from trees, some as different as one tree is from another and of the same name but quite a different growth in history, and some as different as one tree kind from another, as birch from beech, oak from fir. There were a few older bearded and galed like hail but ancient trees, though none looked as ancient as Treebeard, and there were tall strong ants, clean-limed and smooth-skinned like forest trees in their pride, but there were no young men's, no saplings. Altogether there were about 2 dozen standing on the white grassy floor of the dingle, and as many more were marching in. At first Merry and Pippin were struck chiefly by the variety that they saw, the many shapes, colors, and differences in girth and height and length of leg and arm, and in the number of toes and fingers, anywhere from 3 to 9. A few seemed more or less related to Treebeard and reminded them of beech trees or oaks, but there were other kinds. Some recalled the chestnut brown skin Ants with large spay-fingered hands and short thick legs. Some recall the ash tall straight grey ants with many fingered hands and long legs. Some the fir the tallest ants and others the birch the rowan and leon. But when the ants all gathered around Treebeard, bowing their heads slightly, murmuring in their slow musical voices and looking along and intently at the strangers, then the hobbit saw that they were all of the same kindred and all had the same eyes, not all so old or so deep as Treebeard's, but all with the same slow steady, thoughtful expression and the same green flicker. As soon as the whole company was assembled, standing in a wide circle round Treebeard, a curious and unintelligible conversation began. The ants began to murmur slowly. First one joined and then another, until they were all chanting together in a long rising and falling rhythm, now louder on one side of the ring, now dying away there and rising to a great boom on the other side. Though he could not catch or understand any of the words, he supposed the language was Entish. Pippin found the sound very pleasant to listen to at first, but gradually his attention wavered after a long time, and the chance showed no signs of slackening. He found himself wondering, since Entish was such an unhill language, whether they had yet got further than good morning, and if Treebeard was to call the roll, how many days it would take to sing all their names. I wonder what the N is for yes or no, he thought. He music yawned. Treebeard was immediately aware of him. Hey my Pippin, he said, and the other ants all stopped their chant. You are a hasty folk, I was forgetting, and anyway it is wearisome listening to a speech you do not understand. You may get down now. I have told your names to the end Moduad, and they have seen you, and they have agreed that you are not orcs, and that a new line shall be put in the old lists. We have got no further yet, but that is quick work for an end. You and Mary can stroll about in the dingle if you like. There is a well of good water if you need refreshing. Way yonder is the north bank. There are still some words to speak before the moot really begins. I will come to see you again and tell you how things are going. He put the hobbits down before they walked away. They bowed low. This feat seemed to amuse the ant very much, to judge by the tone of their murmur and the flicker of their eyes, but they soon turned back to their own business. Merry and Pippin climbed up the path that came from the west and looked through the opening in the great hedge. Long tree-clad slopes rose from the lip of the dingle, and away beyond them, above the fir trees of the furthest ridge, there rose sharp and white the peak of a high mountain. Southwards to their left they could see the forest fall in a way down into the grey distance. There, far away, there was a pale green glimmer that Mary guessed to be the glimpse of the plains of Rohan. I wonder where Isengard is, said Pippin. I don't know quite where we are, said Mary. That pink is probably Method, and as far as I can remember, the ring of Isengard lies in a fork or deep cleft at the end of the mountains. It is probably down behind the great ridge. There seems to be a smoke or haze over there left on the P. Don't you think? What is Isengard like, said Pippin. I wonder what the ants can do about it anyway. So do I, said Mary. Isengard is a sort of ring of rocks or hills, I think, with a flat space inside and an island or pillar of rock in the middle called Orinkzaran has a tower on it. There is a gate, perhaps more than one, in the encircling wall, and I believe there's a stream running through it. It comes out of the mountains and flows on across the gap of Ran. It does not seem to be the sort of place for an to tackle, but I have an odd feeling about these ants somehow. I don't think they're quite as safe and well funny as they seem. They seem slow, queer and patient, almost sad, and yet I believe they could be roused if that happened. I would rather not be on the other side. Yes, said Pippin, I know what you mean. That might be all the difference between an old cow sitting and thoughtfully cheering and a bull charging, and the charge might come suddenly. I wonder if Treebeard will rouse them. I'm sure he means to try, but they don't like being roused. Treebeard got roused himself last night and then bottled it up again. The hobbits turned back. The voices of the ants were still rising and falling in their conclave. The sun had now arisen high enough to look over the high edge. It gleamed on the tops of the birches and lit the northward side of the dingle with a cool yellow light. There they saw a little glittering fountain. They walked along the rim of the great bowl at the feet of the evergreens. It was pleasant to feel cool grass about their toes again and not to be in a hurry, and then they climbed down the gushing water. They drank a little, a clean cold sharp draught, and sat down on the mossy stone watching the patches of sun on the grass and the shadows of the sailing clouds passing over the floor of the dingle. The murmur of the ants went on. It seemed a very strange and remote place outside their world and far from everything that had ever happened to them. A great longing came over them for the faces and voices of their companions, especially for Frodo and Sam and for Strider. At last there came a pause in the ant voices, and looking up they saw Treebeard coming towards them with another ant at his side. "Here I am again," said Treebeard. "Are you getting weary of feeling impatient?" Well, I am afraid that you must not get impatient yet. We have finished the first stage now, but I have still got to explain things again to those that live a long way off far from Isard, and those that I could not get round to before the moot, and after that we shall have to decide what to do. However, deciding what to do who does not take and so long as going over all the facts and events that they have to make up their minds about. Still, it is no use denying we shall be here a long time yet, a couple of days very likely, so I have brought you a companion. He has an end house nearby. Ballad is his elvish name. He says he has already made up his mind and does not need to remain at the moot. He the nearest thing among us to a hasty end. You want to get on together. Goodbye." Treebeard turned and left them. Ballad stood for some time surveying the hobbit solemnly, and they looked at him, wondering when he would show any signs of hastiness. He was tall and seemed to be one of the younger ants. He had smooth shining skin on his arms and legs. His lips were ruddy and his hair was grey-green. He could bend and sway like a slender tree in the wind. At last he spoke, and his voice, though resonant, was higher and clearer than Treebeard's. "My friends, let us go for a walk," he said. "I am Ballad, that is Quick Beam in your language, but it is only a nickname. Of course they have called me that ever since I said yes to an elder." And before he had finished his question, "Also I drink quickly and go out while some are still wetting their beards. Come with me." He reached down two shapely arms and gave a long-fingered hand to each of the hobbits. All that day they walked about in the woods with him, singing and laughing, for Quick Beam often laughed. He laughed if the sun came out from behind a cloud. He laughed if they came upon a stream or spring. Then he stooped and splashed his feet in head with water. He laughed sometimes at some sound or whisper in the trees. Whenever he saw a rowan tree he halted a while with his arms and stretched out and sang and swayed as he sang. At nightfall he brought them to his own house, nothing more than a mossy stone set upon turfs under a green bank. Rowan trees grew in a circle about it, and there was water as in all end houses, a spring bubbling out from the bank. They talked for a while as darkness fell on the forest. Not far away the voices of the ant mood could be heard, still going on, but now they seemed deeper and less leisurely, and every now and again one great voice would rise in a high and quickening music while all the others died away. But beside them Regalad spoke gently in their own tongue, almost whispering, and they learned that he belongs to Skog's people, and the country where they had lived had been ravaged. That seemed to the hobbits quite enough to explain his hastiness, at least in the matter of orcs. "There were rowan trees in my home," said Ballad softly and sadly, "rowan trees that took root when I was in hunting many years ago in the quiet of the world. The oldest were wanted by the ants to try and please the wives, but they looked at them and smiled and said that they knew where whiter blossom and rich of fruit were growing. Yet there are no trees of all that race, the people of the rose, that are so beautiful to me. And these trees grew and grew till the shadow of each was like a green hole, and their red berries in the autumn are like a bird and a beauty. And birds used to flock there. I like birds even when they chatter, and the wren has enough hand to spare, but the birds became unfriendly and greedy and tore at the trees and threw the fruit down and did not eat it. Then orcs came with axes and cut down my trees. I came and called them by their long names, but they did not quiver, they did not hear or answer, they lay dead. ORIR upon your hair how white the blossom lay. O Rowan mine, I saw you shine upon a summer's day, your are so bright, your leaves so light, your voice so cool and soft, upon your head now golden red the crown you bore aloft. O Rowan dread, upon your head your hair is dry and grey, your crown is filled, your voice is stilled forever. And the day Ahar music, the hobbits fell asleep to the sound of the soft singing of ballad that seemed to lament in many tongues the fall of trees that he had loved. The next day they spent also in his company, but they did not go far from his house. Most of the time they sat silent under the shelter of the bank, for the wind was colder and the clouds closer and grayer. There was little sunshine, and in the distance the voices of the ants. The mood still rose and fell, sometimes loud and strong, sometimes slow and sad, sometimes quickening, sometimes slow and solemn as a music dirge. A second night came, and still the ants held conclave under hurrying clouds and fitful stars. The third day broke bleak and windy. At sunrise the ants' voice rose to a great clamor and then died down again as the morning wore on. The wind fell and the air grew heavy with expectancy. The hobbits could see that Bread was now listening intently, although to them down in the dell of his own house the sound of the mood was faint. The afternoon came, and the sun, going west towards the mountains, set out long yellow beams between the cracks and fishes of the clouds. Suddenly they were aware that everything was very quiet. The whole forest stood in listening silence. Of course the ant voices had stopped. What did that mean? Regalad was standing up erect and tense, looking back northwards towards Dan Dingle. Then with a crash came a great ringing music shout. The trees quivered and bent as if a gust had struck them. There was another pause, and then a marching music began like solemn drums. And above the rolling beats and booms there welled voices singing high and strong, we come with our of drum. The ants were coming ever near, and louder rose their song, we come with all true ballad. Picked up the hobbits and strove from his house. Before long they saw the marching line approaching. The ants were swinging along with great strides down the slope towards them. Treebeard was at their head and some 50 followers were behind him, 2 abreast, keeping step with their feet and beating time with their hands upon their flanks. As they drew near, the flash and flicker of their eyes could be seen. Bo home, here we come, the boom, here we come. At La Cold Tree appeared when he caught sight of Gred in the H. Come join the M, we are off to Earthy, and cried in many voices, wise and God, the wise and God be ringed and be with doors of stone. The wising God be strong, hard as cold as stone as be. We go to war to hew the stone and break the door. The bee and bough are burning now, the furnace she's. We go to war, land of gloom with Tra, of doom with R, of Dr. We come God with come. So they sang as they marched southwards. Gred, his eyes shining, swung into the line beside Treebeard the Old, and now took the hobbits back and sent them on his shoulders again. And so they rode proudly at the head of the singing company with beating hearts and heads held high, though they had expected something to happen eventually. They were amazed at the change that had come over the ends. It seemed now as sudden as the bursting of a flood that had long been held back by a dike. The ants made up their minds rather quickly after all, didn't they? Pippin ventured to say after some time, when for a moment the singing paused and only the beating of the hands and feet was heard. Oh, quickly, said Shard. Yes, indeed, quicker than I expected. Indeed, I have not seen them rouse like this for many an age. The ANS do not like being roused, and we never are roused unless it is clear to us that our trees and our lives are in great danger. That has not happened in this forest since the wars of SA and the men of the sea. It is the orc work, the want and hing row without even the bad excuse of feeding the fires that have so reared us and the treachery of a neighbor who should have helped us. Wizards ought to know better, they do know better. There is no curse in Elvis HSH or the tongues of men bad enough for such tracery. Down with Schumann. Will you really break the doors of Eisen Asbury? Oh well, we could. You know, you do not know perhaps how strong we are. Maybe you have heard of trolls. They are mighty strong, but trolls are only fits made by the enemy in the great darkness. In mockery of and as sports were of elves, we are stronger than trolls. We are made of the bones of the earth. We can split stones like the roots of trees, only quicker, far quicker. Live, our minds are roused. If we are not heat down or destroyed by fire, a blast of sorcery, we could spit Erd into splinters and crack its WS into trouble. But Sauron will try to stop you, won't he? Ah yes, that is so. I have not forgotten it. Indeed, I have thought long about it. But you see, many of the ants are younger than I am by many lives of trees. They are all roused now, and their mind is all on one thing, breaking Isengard. But they will start thinking again before long. They will cool down a little when we take our evening drink. Oh, what thirst we shall have! But let them march now, and seeing we have a long way to go and there is time ahead for thought, it is something to have started. Treebeard marched on singing with the others for a while, but after a time his voice died to a murmur and fell silent again. Pippin could see that his old brow was wrinkled and knotted at last. He looked up, and Pippin could see a sad look in his eyes, sad but not unhappy. There was a light in them, as if the green flame had sunk deeper into the dark wells of his thought. Of course it is likely enough, my friends, he said slowly, likely enough that we are going to our doom, the last march of the Ents. But if we stayed at home and did nothing, doom would find us anyway, sooner or later. That thought has long been growing in our hearts, and that is why we are marrying now. It was not a hasty resolve. Now at least the last watch of the ANS may be worth AS. He sighed, we may help the other peoples before we pass away. Still, I should have liked to see the songs come true about the end. Why, I should dearly have liked to see Finem again. But they're, my friends, songs like trees bear fruit, oh, their own time and their own way, and sometimes they are withered untimely. The ants went striding on at a great pace. They have descended into a long fold of the land that fell away south. Now they began to climb up and up onto the high western ridge. The woods fell away, and they came to scattered groups of birch, and then to bare slopes where only a few gaunt pine trees grew. The sun sank behind the dark hill back in front. Great dusk fell. Pippin looked behind. The number of the Inn had grown, but what was happening where the dim bare slopes that they had crossed should lie? He thought he saw groves of trees, but they were moving. Could it be that the trees of Fangon were awake and the forest was rising, marching over the hills to walk? He rubbed his eyes, wondering if sleep and shadow had deceived him, but the great grey shapes moved steadily onward. There was a noise like wind in many branches. The ants were drawn near the crest of the ridge now, and all song had ceased. Night fell, and there was silence. Nothing was to be heard save a quaint quiver of the earth beneath the feet of the ants, and a rustle, the shade of a whisper as of many drifting leaves. At last they stood upon the summit and looked down into a dark pit at the great cliff at the end of the mountains. Nankurur, the valley of Sand Night, lies over Isengard, said Treebeard. My very bones are killed, said Jimmy, flapping his arms and stamping his feet. Day had come at last. At dawn the companions had made such breakfast as they could. Now in the growing light they were getting ready to search the ground again for the signs of the hobbits. And do not forget that old man, said Jimmy. I should be happier if I could see the print of a boot. Why would that make you happy, said Legolas. Because an old man with feet that leave marks might be no more than he seemed, answered the dwarf. Maybe, said the elf, but a heavy boot might leave no print. Here the grass is deep and springy that would not baff a ranger, said Jimmy. A bent blade isn't enough for Aragon to read, but I do not expect him to find any traces. It was an evil phantom of Sauron we saw last night, I am sure of it. Even under the light of morning his eyes are looking out on us from Fangon even now. Maybe that is likely enough, said Aragon, yet I'm not sure. I'm thinking of the horses you said last night, Jimmy, that they were scared away, but I did not think so. Did you hear them, Legolas? Do they sound to you like beasts in terror? No, said Legolas, I heard them clearly, but for the darkness in our own fear I should have guessed that they were beasts. Swed with some sudden gladness they spoke. His horses will when they meet a friend that they have long missed. So I thought, said Aragon, that I cannot read the riddle unless they return. Come, the light is growing fast, let us look first and guess later. We should begin here near to our own camping grounds, searching carefully all about and working up the slope towards the forest to find the hobbit as our errand. Whatever we may think of our visitor in the night, if they escaped by some chance they must have hidden in the trees, or they would have been seen. If we find nothing between here and the eaves of the wood, then we will make a last search upon the battlefield and among the ashes, but there is little hope there. The horsemen of Rohan did their work too well. For some time the companions crawled and groped upon the ground. The trees stood mournfully above them, its dry leaves now hanging limp and rattling in the chill easterly wind. Aragon moved slowly away. He came to the ashes of the watchfire near the river bank and then began to retrace the ground back towards the knoll where the battle had been fought. Suddenly he stooped and bent low with his face almost in the grass. Then he called to the others. Hey, they came running up here. At last we find news, said Aaron. He lifted up a broken leaf for them to see. A large pale leaf of golden hue, now fading and turning brown. Here is a melon leaf of Laon, and here are small crumbs on it and a few more crumbs on the grass, and see, here are some pieces of cut cord lying nearby, and here is a knife that cut them, said Jimmy. He stooped and drew out of it a sock into which some heavy foot had trampled it. A short jagged blade, the half of which it had been snapped, was beside it. Was an orc weapon, he said, holding it gingerly and looking with disgust at the carved handle. It had been shaped like a hideous head with squinting eyes and a leering mouth. Well, here is the strangest riddle that we have yet found, exclaimed Legolas. A bound prisoner escapes from both the orcs and from the surrounding horsemen. He then stops while still in the open and cuts his bonds with an orc knife. But how and why? For if his legs were tied, how did he walk? And if his arms were tied, how did he use the knife? And if neither were tied, why did he cut the cords at all? Being pleased with his skill, he then sat down and quietly ate some whey bread. That at least is enough to show that he was a hobbit without the melon leaf. After that, I suppose he turned his arms into wings and flew away singing into the trees. It should be easy to find him. We only need wings ourselves. There were sorcery here, right enough, said Jimmy. What was that old man doing? What have you to say, R.R. to the reading of Legolas? Can you better it? Maybe I could, said Aragon, smiling. There are some other signs near at hand that you have not considered. I agree that the prisoner was a hobbit and must have had either legs or hands free before he came here. I guess that it was hands, because the riddle then becomes easier, and also because as I read the marks, he was carried to this point by an orc. Blood was spilled there a few paces away. Orc blood. There are deep prints of hooves all about this spot, and signs that a heavy thing was dragged away. The orc was slain by horsemen, and later his body was hauled to the fire, but the hobbit was not seen. He was not in the open, for it was night and he still had his elven cloak. He was exhausted and hungry, and it is not to be wondered at that when he had cut his bonds with the knife of his fallen enemy, he rested and ate a little before he crept away. But it is a comfort to know that he had some alms in his pocket, even though he ran away without gear or pack. That perhaps is like a hobbit, I say he, though I hope and guess that both Merry and Pippin were here together. There is however nothing to show that for certain. And how do you suppose that either of our friends came to have a hand free? asked Jimmy. I do not know how it happened, answered Aragon, nor do I know why an orc was carrying them away, not to help them to escape, we may be sure, nay, rather I think that I now begin to understand a matter that has puzzled me from the beginning, why when Boromir had fallen were the orcs content with the capture of Mar and Pippin they not seek out the rest of us nor attack camp, but instead they went with all speed towards Isengard. Did they suppose that they had captured the ring bearer and his faithful comrade? I think not. Their masters would not dare to give such plain orders to the orcs. Even if they knew so much themselves, they would not speak openly to them of the ring. They are not trusty servants, but I think orcs had been commanded to capture hobbits alive at all costs. An attempt was made to slip out with the precious prisoners before the battle. Treachery perhaps likely enough with such folk. Some large and bold orc may have been trying to escape with the prize alone for his own ends. That is my tale. Others might be devised, but on this way we may count. In any case, one at least of our friends escaped. It is our task to find him and help him before we return to Rohan. We must not be daunted by Fangor, since need drove him into that dark place. I do not know which dawns me more, fon what a thought of the long road through Rohan on foot, said Jimmy. Then let us go to the forest, said Aragorn. It was not long before Aragorn found fresh signs. At one point near the bank of the Entwash he came upon footprints, hobbit prints, but too light for much to be made of him. Then again beneath the bole of a great tree on the very edge of the wood more prints were discovered. The earth was bare and dry and did not reveal much. One hit at least stood here for a while and looked back, and then he turned away to the forest, said Aragorn. Then we must go in too, said Jimmy, but I do not like the look of this Fangorn, and we were warned against it. I wish the chase had led anywhere else. I do not think the word feels evil, whatever tales may say, said Legolas. He stood under the eaves of the forest, stooping forward as if he were listening and peering with wide eyes into the shadows. No, it is not evil. What evil is in it is far away. I catch only the faintest echoes of dark places where the hearts of the trees are black. There is no malice near us, but there is watchfulness and anger. Well, it has no cause to be angry with me, said Jimmy. I have done no harm. That is just as well, said Legolas, but nonetheless it has suffered harm. There is something happening inside, or going to happen. Do you not feel the tenseness? It takes my breath. I feel the air is stuffy, said the dwarf. This wood is lighter than BK wood, but it is musty and shabby. It is old, very old, said the elf, as I've not felt since I journeyed with you children. It is old and full of memory. I could have been happy here if I had come to days of peace. I dare say you could, snorted Gimli. You are a wood elf. Anywhere there elves of any kind or strange folk, yet you comfort me. Where you go I will go, but keep your bow ready to hand, and I will keep my axe loose in my bell. Not for you short trees, he added hastily, looking up at the tree under which they stood. I do not wish to eat that old man at unawares without an argument ready to hand. That is all. Let us go. With that the three hunters plunged into the forest of Fangor. Lelos and Jimmy left the tracking to Aragorn. There was little for him to see. The floor of the forest was dry and covered with a drift of leaves, but guessing that the fugitives would stay near the water, he returned often to the banks of the stream. So it was that he came upon the place where Merry and Pippin had drunk and bathed their feet. They are plain for all to see, with the footprints of two hobbits, one somewhat smaller than the other. This is good tidings, said Aragorn, yet the marks are 2 days old, and it seems that at this point the hobbits left the water side. Then what shall we do now, said Gimli. We cannot pursue them through the whole fastness of Fangor. We have come ill supplied. If we do not find them soon, we shall be of no use to them except to sit down beside them and show our friendship by starving together. If that is indeed all we can do, then we must do that, said that. Go, let us go on. They came at length to the steep abrupt end of Treebeard's Hill and looked up at the rock wall with its rough steps leading to a high shelf. Gleams of sun was striking through the hurrying clouds, and the forest now looked less grey and drear. "Let us go up and look about us," said Legolas. "I still feel my breath short. I should like to taste a freer air for a while." The companions climbed up. Aragorn came last, moving slowly. He was scanning the steps and ledges closely. "I am almost sure that the hobbits have been up here," he said, "but there are no other marks, very strange marks which I do not understand. I wonder if we can see anything from this ledge which will help us to guess which way they went next." He stood up and looked about, but he saw nothing that was of any use. The shelf faced southward and eastward, but only on the east was the view open. There he could see the heads of the trees descending in ranks towards the plain from which they had come. "They have journeyed a long way round," said Legolas. "We could have all come here safer together if we had left the great river on the second or third day and struck west. Few can foresee whether their road will lead them till they come to its end, but we did not wish to come to Fangor," said Jimmy. "Yet here we are, and nicely caught in the net," said Legolas. Look at what," said Jimmy, "there in the trees where I have not help eyes." "Hush, speak more softly." "Look," said Legolas, pointing down in the wood back in the way that we have just come. "It is he. Can you not see him passing from tree to tree?" "Oh, I see now his skim." "Look, Aragorn, let not warn you. There is the old man all in dirty grey rags. That is why I could not see him at first." Aragorn looked and beheld a bent figure moving slowly. It was not far away. It looked like an old beggar man, walking wearily, leaning on a rough staff. His head was bowed, and he did not look towards them. In other lands they would have greeted him with kind words, but now they stood silent, each feeling a strange expectancy. Something was approaching that held a hidden power or menace. Jimmy gazed with wide eyes for a while as step by step the figure drew nearer. Then suddenly, unable to contain himself longer, he burst out, "Get bow, Ligas, be it. It's ready. It is Salin. Do not let him speak or put a spell on us. Shoot first." Ligas took his bow and bent it slowly, and as if some other will resisted him, he held an arrow loosely in his hand but did not fit it into the string. Aragorn stood silent. His face was watchful and intent. "Why are you waiting? What is the matter with you?" said G in a hissing whisper. "Tas is right," said Aragorn quietly. "We may not shoot an old man, sir, unawares and unchallenged. Whatever fear or doubt be on us, watch and wait." At that moment the old man quickened his pace and came with surprising speed on the foot of the rock wall. Then suddenly he looked up. While they stood motionless looking down, there was no sound. They could not see his face. He was hooded, and above the hood he wore a wide-brimmed hat, so that all his features were overshadowed except for the end of his nose and his grey beard. It seemed to Aragorn that he caught the gleam of eyes, keen and bright, from within the shadow of the hooded brows. At last the old man broke the silence. "Well met indeed, my friends," he said in a soft voice. "I wish to speak to you. Will you come down, or shall I come up?" Without waiting for an answer, he began to climb. "No," cried Jimmy, "stop him." "Lalas, did I not say that I wished to speak to you?" said the old man. "Put we your bow?" asked your elf. The bow and arrow fell from Eos's hands, and his arms hung loose at his sides. "And you, master dwarf, pray take your hand from your axe half until I am up. You will not need such arguments." Jimmy stared and then stood still at staring while the old man sprang up the rough steps as nimbly as a goat. All weariness seemed to have left him as he stepped up on the shelf. There was a gleam too brief for certainty, a quick glint of white, as if some garment shrouded by the grey rags had been for an instant revealed. The intake of Jim's breath could be heard as a loud hiss in the silence. "Well met, I say again," said the old man, coming towards them. When he was a few feet away he stood stooping over his staff with his head thrust forward, peering at them from under his hood. "And what may you be doing in these parts?" "An elf, a man and a dwarf, all clad in elvish fashion. No doubt there is a tale war hearing behind it. All such things are not often seen." "Yeah, you Speak as one that knows fan well. Is that Aaron? Is that so? Not well, said the old man. That would be a study of many lives, but I come here now and again. Might we know your name and then hear what it is that you have to say to us, said Aragon. The morning passes and we have an errand that will not wait. As for what I wish to say, I have said it. What may you be doing? What tale can you tell of yourselves? As for my name, he broke off, laughing long and softly. Aragon felt a shudder run through him at the sound, a strange cold thrill. And yet it was not fear or terror that he felt, rather it was like the sudden bite of a keen air or the slap of a cold rain that makes an uneasy sleeper. My name, said the old man again. Have you not guessed it already? You have heard it before, I think. Yes, you have heard it before, but come now, what of your tale? The three companions stood silent and made no answer. There are some who would begin to doubt whether your errand is fit to tell, said the old man happily. I know something of it. You are tracking the footsteps of two young hobbits, I believe. Yes, hobbits downstairs. As if you had never heard the strange name before. You have, and so have I. Well, they climbed up here the day before yesterday and they met someone they did not expect. Does that comfort you? And now you would like to know where they were taken. Well, maybe I can give you some news about that, but why are we standing? Your errand, you see, is no longer as urgent as you thought. Let us sit down and be more at ease. The old man turned away and went towards a heap of fallen stones and rock at the foot of the cliff behind. Immediately, as if a spell had been removed, the others relaxed and stirred. Give's hand went at once to his axe. Half Aragon drew his sword. Lolas picked up his bow. The old man took no notice but stooped and sat himself on a low flat stone. Then his grey cloak drew apart and they saw beyond doubt that he was clothed beneath all in white. Cried Jimmy, springing towards him with axe in hand. Speak, tell us where you've hidden our friends and what have you done with them. Speak, or I will make a D in your hand. But even a wizard will find it hard to deal with. The old man was too quick for him. He sprang to his feet and leaped to the top of a large rock. There he stood, grown suddenly tall, towering above them. His hood and his grey rags were flung away, his white garments shone. He lifted up his staff and Gi's axe leapt from his grasp and fell ringing to the ground. The sword of Aragon, stiff in his motionless hand, blazed with a sudden fire. Leg gave a great shout and shot an arrow high into the air. It vanished in a flash of flame. Are here well met, I say to you again, Nicholas, said the old man. They all gazed at him. His hair was white as snow in the sunshine, and gleaming white was his robe. His eyes under his deep brows were bright, piercing as the rays of the sun. Power was in his hand. Between wonder, joy and fear they stood and found no words to say. At last Aragon stirred. See, he said, beyond all hope you returned to us in our need. What veil was over my sight? Jimmy said nothing but sank to his knees, shading his eyes. The old man repeated, as if recalling from old memory a long disused word. Yes, that was my name. I was Gondom. He stepped down from the rock and, picking up his grey cloak, wrapped it about him. It seemed as if the sun had been shining but now was hid in cloud again. Yes, he may still call me Gandalf, he said, and the voice was the voice of their old friend and guide. Good have my good Jimmy, no blame to you and no harm done to me. Indeed, my friends, none of you have any weapon that could hurt me. Be merry, we meet again at the turn of the tide. The great storm is coming, but the tide has turned. He laid his hand on Jim's head and the dwarf looked up and laughed suddenly. He said, but you are all in white. Yes, I am white now, said Gandalf. Indeed I am Saruman. One might almost say Saruman as he should have been. But come now, tell me of yourselves. I have passed through fire and deep water since we parted. I have forgotten much that I thought I knew, and learned again much that I had forgotten. I can see many things far off, but many things that are close at hand I cannot see. Tell me of yourselves. What do you wish to know? Said Aragon. All that has happened since we had parted on the bridge would be a long tale. Will you not first give us news of the hobbits? Did you find them, and are they safe? No, I did not find them, said Gondal. There was a darkness over the valleys of the Emyn. I did not know of their captivity until the eagle told me. The eagle, said Legolas. I've seen an eagle high and far off. The last time was 3 days ago above the Emyn. Yes, said Gandalf, that was Guhir the Wind Lord who rescued me from Orunc. I sent him before me to watch the river and gathered tidings. His sight is keen, but he cannot see all that passes under hill and tree. Some things he has seen and others I have seen myself. The ring now passed beyond my help or the help of any of the company that set out from Rivendell. Very nearly it was revealed to the enemy, but it escaped. I had some part in that, for I sat in a high place and I strove with the dark tower in the shadow ped. Then I was weary, very weary, and I walked long in dark thought. Then you know about Thodo, said Jimmy. How do things go with him? I cannot say. He was saved from a great peril, but many lie before him. Still he resolved to go alone to Mordor, and he set out. That is all I can say. Not alone, said Lalus. We think that Sam went with him. Did he? said Gandalf, and there was a gleam in his eye and a smile on his face. Did he indeed? It is news to me, yet it does not surprise me. Good, very good. You like in my heart. You must tell me more. Now sit with me and tell me the tale of your journey. The companion sat on the ground at his feet, and Aragorn took up the tale. For a long while Gandalf said nothing, and he asked no questions. His hands were spread upon his knees and his eyes were closed at last. When Aragorn spoke of the death of Boromir and of his last journey upon the great river, the old man sighed. You have not said all that you know. Oh, guess, Aragorn, my friend, he said quietly. Poor Boromir, I could not see what happened to him. It was a trial for such a man, a warrior. The Lord of Mengadriel told me that he was in peril, but he escaped in the end. I am glad it was not in vain that the young hobbits came with us, if only for Boromir's sake. But that is not the only part they have to play, and their coming was like the falling of small stones that starts an Havian in the mountains. Even as we talk here I hear the first rumblings. San had best not be caught away from home when the dam bursts in. One thing you have not changed, dear friend, said Aragorn. You still speak in riddles. What in riddles? said Gondar. No, but I was talking aloud to myself. A habit of the old. They choose the wisest person present to speak to the long explanations needed by the young. He laughed, but the sound now seemed warm and kindly as a gleam of sunshine. I am no longer young even in the reckoning of men of the ancient houses, said Aragorn. Will you not open your mind more clearly to me? What then shall I say? said Gandalf, and paused for a while in thought. This in brief is how I see things at the moment. If you wish to have a piece of my mind as plain as possible, the enemy of course has long known that the ring is abroad and that it is borne by a hobbit. He knows now the number of our company that set out from Rivendell and the kind of each of us, but he does not yet perceive our purpose clearly. He supposes that we are all going to Minas Tirith, for that is what he would himself have done in our place, and according to his wisdom it would have been a heavy stroke against his power. Indeed, he is in great fear, not knowing what mighty one may suddenly appear wielding the ring and assailing him with war, seeking to cast him down and take his place. That we should wish to cast him down and have no one in his place is not a thought that occurs to his mind. That we should try to destroy the ring itself has not yet entered into his darkest dream, in which no doubt you will see our good fortune and our hope for imagining war. He has let loose war, believing that he has no time to waste, for he that strikes the first blow, if he strikes it hard enough, may need to strike no more. So the forces that he has long been preparing he is now setting in motion sooner than he intended. Wise fool! But if he had used all his power to guard Mordor so that none could enter, and bent all his guile to the hunting of the ring, then indeed hope would have faded. Neither ring nor ring bearer could have long eluded him, but now his eye gazes abroad rather then near at home, and mostly he looks towards Minas Tirith. Very soon now his strength will fall upon it like a storm, for already he knows that the messengers he sent to waylay the company have failed again. They have not found the ring, neither have they brought away any hobbits as hostages. Had they done even so much as that, it would have been a heavy blow to us, and it might have been fatal. But let us not darken our hearts by imagining the trial of their gentle loyalty in the dark tar, for the enemy has failed so far thanks to Saruman. And is not Saruman a traitor, said Jimmy. Indeed yes, said Gandalf, doubling, and is not that strange? Nothing that we have endured of late has seemed so grievous as treason of Isengard. Even reckoned as a lord in Captain San has grown very strong. He threatens the men of Rohan and draws off their help from Minas Tirith even as the main blow is approaching from the east. Yet a treacherous weapon is ever a danger to the hand. Sauron also had a mind to capture the ring for himself, or at least to snare some hobbit for his evil purposes. So between them our enemies have contrived only to bring Merry and Pippin with marvelous speed and in the nick of time to Fangor, where otherwise they would never have come at all. Also they have filled themselves with new doubts that disturb their plans. Now tidings of the battle will come to Mordor thanks to the horsemen of Rohan, but the Dark Lord knows that 2 hobbits were taken in a mule and borne away towards Isengard against the will of his own servants. He now has Isengard to fear as well as Minth. If Minth falls it will go ill with San. It is a pity that our friends lie in between, said Jimmy. If no land had divided Isengard and Mordor, then they could fight while we watched and waited. The victor would emerge stronger than either and free from doubt, said Gandalf. But Isengard cannot not fight Mordor unless San first obtains the ring. That he will never do. Now he does not yet know his peril. There is much that he does not know. He was so eager to lay his hands on his prey that he could not wait at home, and he came forth to meet and to spy on his messengers, but he came too late for once, and the battle was over and beyond his help before he reached these parts. He did not remain here long. I took into his mind, and I see his doubt. He has no woodcraft. He believes that the horsemen slew and burned all upon the field of battle, but he does not know whether the orcs were bringing any prisoners or not, and he does not know of the quarrel between his servants and the orcs of Mordor, nor does he know of the winged messenger. The winged messenger cried, Legolas, I shot him with the bee of Gadriel above Sanir, and I f him from the sky. He filled us all with great fear. What new terror is this one that you cannot slay with arrows, said Gandalf. You only slew his steed. It was a good deed, but the rider was soon dead again, for he was a Nazgul, one of the 9 who ride now upon winged steeds. Soon their terror will overshadow the last armies of our friends cutting off the sun, but they have not yet been allowed to cross the river, and San does not know of his new shape in which the ring wraiths had been clad. His thought is ever on the ring. Was it present in the battle? Was it found? What if the Odin, Lord of the Mark, should come by it and learn of its power? That is the danger that he sees, and he has fled back to Isengard to double and treble his assault on Rohan. And all the time there is another danger close at hand which he does not see. Busy with his fiery thoughts, he has forgotten Treebeard. Now you speak to yourself again, said Aragorn with a smile. Treebeard is not known to me, and I have guessed part of Sauron's double treachery, yet I do not see in what way the coming of 2 hobbits to Fangor has served, save to give us a long and fruitless chase. Oh wait a minute, cried Gimli, there is another thing that I should like to know first. Was it you, Gandalf, or San, that we saw last night? You certainly did not see me, answered Gandalf, therefore I must guess that you saw San. Evidently we look so much alike that your desire to make an incurable dent in my hat must be excused. Good, said Gimli, I am glad that it was not you. Gandalf laughed again. Yes, my good dwarf, he said, it is a comfort not to be mistaken at all points. Do I not know it only too well? But of course I never blamed you for your welcome of me. How could I do so, who have so often counseled my friends to suspect even their own hands when dealing with the enemy? Bless you, Gimli, son of Gloin, maybe he will see us both together one day and judge between us. But the hobbits' lees broke in. We've come far to seek them, and you seem to know where they are. Where are They now with Treebeard and the ants, said Gandalf. The ants, exclaimed Aragorn. Then there is truth in the old legends about the dwellers in the deep forests and the giant shepherds of the trees. Are there still ants in the world? I thought they were only a memory of ancient days, if indeed they were ever more than a legend of Rohan. A legend of Rohan, cried Legolas. Nay, every elf in Wilderland has sung songs of the old Onorm and their long sorrow, yet even among us there are only a memory. If I were to meet one still walking in this world, then indeed I should feel young again. But Treebeard, that is only a rendering of Fangaron into the common speech. Yet you seem to speak of a person. Who is Treebeard? Ah, now you are asking much, said Gandalf. The little that I know of his long slow story would make a tale of which we have no time now. Treebeard is Fangor, the guardian of the forest. He is the oldest of the Inns, the oldest living thing that still walks beneath the sun upon this Middle Earth. I hope indeed, Lalus, that you may yet meet him. Merry and Pippin have been fortunate they met him here, even where we sit, for he came here 2 days ago and bore them away to his dwelling far off by the roots of the mountains. He often comes here, especially when his mind is uneasy and rumors of the world outside trouble him. I saw him 4 days ago striding among the trees, and I think he saw me, for he paused, but I did not speak, for I was heavy with thought and weary after my struggle with the Eye of Mordor, and he did not speak either, nor call my name. Perhaps he also thought that you were sans, said Jimmy. Could you speak of him as if he was a friend? I thought Fangorn is dangerous. Dangerous, cried Gandalf. So am I, very dangerous, more dangerous than anything you will ever meet unless you brought alive before the seat of the Dark Lord. And Aragorn is dangerous. Legolas is dangerous. You are beset with dangers, Gimli, son of Gloin, for you are dangerous yourself in your own fashion. Certainly the forest of Fangorn is perilous, not least to those that are too ready with their axes, and Fangorn itself, he is perilous too, yet he is wise and kindly nonetheless. But now his long slow wrath is brimming over, and all the forest is filled with it. The coming of the hobbits and the tidings that they brought has spilled it. It will soon be running like a flood, but its tide is turned against Sauron and the axes of Isengard. A thing is about to happen which has not happened since the elder days. The ants are going to wake up and find that they are strong. What will they do? asked Legolas in astonishment. Oh, I do not know, said Gandalf. I do not think they know themselves. I wonder. He fell silent, his head bowed in thought. The others looked at him. A gleam of sun through fleeting clouds fell upon his hands, which lay now upturned on his lap. They seemed to be filled with light as a cup is with water. At last he looked up and gazed straight at the sun. The morning is wearing away, he said. Soon we must go. Do we go to find our friends and see Try? asked Aragorn. No, said Gandalf, that is not the road that you must take. I have spoken words of hope, but only of hope. Hope is not victory. War is upon us and all our friends, a war in which only the use of the ring could give us shy of victory. It fills me with great sorrow and great fear, for shall be destroyed and all may be lost. I am Gandalf. Gandalf the white but black is mightier still. He rose and gazed out eastward, shading his eyes as if he saw things far away that none of them could see. Then he shook his head. No, he said in a soft voice, it has gone beyond our reach. Of that at least let us be glad. We can no longer be tempted to use the ring. We must go down to face a peril near despair, yet that deadly peril is removed. He turned. Come, Aragorn, son of Artan, he said, do not regret your choice in the valley of Hmu, nor call it a vain pursuit. You chose amid doubts the path that seemed right. The choice was just, and it has been rewarded, for so we have met in time who otherwise might have met too late. But the quest of your companions is over. Your next journey is marked by your given word. You must go to Eddis and seek out Theoden in his hall, for you are needed. The light of Andúril must now be uncovered in the battle, for which it has long Awaited there is war in Rohan and worse evil it goes ill with Theoden. Then are we not to see the merry young hobbits again, said Legolas. I did not say so, said Off. Who knows, have patience, go where you must go and hope to adore as I go thither also. It is a long way for a man to walk, young or old, said Aragorn. I fear the battle will be over long. Here I come, there we shall see, said Gandalf. Will you come now with me? Yes, we will set out together, said Aragorn, but I do not doubt that you will come here before me if you wish. He rose and looked long at Gondom. The others gazed at them in silence as they stood there facing one another. The grey figure of the man Aragorn, son of Ardern, was tall and stern as stone, his hand upon the hilt of his sword. He looked as if some king out of the mists of the sea had stepped upon the shores of lesser men. Before him stooped the old figure, white shining now as if with some light kindled within, bent laden with years, but holding a power beyond the strength of kings. Do I not say truly, Gandalf, said Aragorn at last, that you could go with so ever you wished, quicker than I in this? I also say you are our captain and our banner. The Dark Lord has 9, but we have one mightier than they, the White Rider. He has passed through the fire and the abyss, and they shall fear him. We will go where he leads. Yes, yes, together we will follow you, said Legolas. But first it would ease my heart, Gandalf, to hear what befell you in Moria. Will you not tell us? Can you not stay even to tell your friends how you were delivered? I have stayed already too long, answered Gandalf. Time is short, but if there were a year to spend I would not tell you all. Then tell us what you will in time allow, said Jimmy. Come, Gandalf, tell us how you feared with the bulk. Name him not, said Gandalf, and for a moment it seemed that the cloud of pain passed over his face and he sat silent, looking old as death. Long time I fell, he said at last slowly, as if thinking back with difficulty. Long I fell, and he fell with me. His fire was about, I was burned. Then we plunged into the deep water and all was dark cold. It was as the tide of death, almost it froze my heart, deep as the abyss that is spanned by Durrance Bridge, and none has measured it, said Jimmy. Yet it has a bottom beyond light and knowledge, said Gandalf. Thither I came at last, to the uttermost foundations of stone. He was withed, his fire was quenched, but now he was a thing of slim, stronger than a strangling snake. He fought under the living earth where time is not counted. Ever he clutched me and ever I heed him, until at last he fled into dark tunnels. They were not made by Duran's folk. Gimli, son of G, far, far below the deepest delvings of the dwarves, the world is ged by nameless things. Even Sauron knows them not, they are older than he. Now I have walked there, but I will bring no report to darken the light of day. In that dark despair my enemy was my only hope, and I pursued him, clutching at his he. Thus he brought me back at last to the secret ways of Khazad-dûm. Too well he knew them all. Ever up now we went until we came to the endless stair. Long has that been lost, said Jimmy. Many have said that it was never made, save in legend, but others say that it was destroyed. It was made and it had not been destroyed, said Gand. And the lowest dungeon to the highest peak it climbed, ascending an unbroken spiral in many thousand steps, until it issued at last in Durin's tower, carved in the living rock of Xeric Zigo, the pinnacle of silver time. There upon Calbul was a lonely window in the snow, and before it lay a narrow space, a dizzy eye above the mist of the world. The sun shone fairly there, but all below was wrapped in cloud. Out he sprang, and even as I came behind he burst into new flame. There was none to see, or perhaps in after aes songs would still be sung of the battle of the peak. Suddenly Gandu laughed, but what would they say in song? Those that looked up from afar thought that the mountain was crowned with storm. Thunder they heard and lightning they said smote upon Spill, and leapt back broken into tongues of fire. Is not that enough? A great smoke rose about us, vapor and steam, ice fell like rain. I threw down my enemy, and he fell from the high place and broke the mountain side where he smote it in his Ruin then darkness took me and I strayed out of thought and time and I wandered far on roads that I will not tell. Naked I was sent back for a brief time until my task is done, and naked I lay upon the mountain top. The tower behind was crumbled into dust, the window gone, the ruined stair was choked with burned and broken stone. I was alone, forgotten, without escape from the hard horror of the world. There I lay staring upward while the stars wheeled over, and each day was as long as a life age of the earth. Faint to my ears came the gathered rumor of all lands, the springing and the dying, the song and the weeping, the slow everlasting groan of overburdened stone. And so at the last go here the wind lord found me again, and he took me up and bore me away. Ever am I fated to be your burden, friend. Indeed I said, a burden you have been, he answered, but not so now. Light as a swan's feather in my claw you, the sun shines through you. Indeed I do not think you need me any more. Were I to let you fall you would float upon the wind. Do not let me fall, IGPED, for I felt life in me. Again bear me to Lothlorien. That indeed is the command of the Lady Gadriel, who sent me to look for you. He answered thus, it was that I came to Cariscaladon and found you but lately gone. There in angel time of that land where days bring healing, not to gay healing I found, and I was clothed in white. Counsel I gave and counsel took, fence by strange roads I came, and messages I bring to some of you. To Aragon I was bidden to say this, where now are the Dunat Elisa. Elisa, why do the king's folk wander? Aar near is the hour when the lost should come forth and the grey company ride from the north, but dark is the path appointed to thee. The dead watch the road that leads to the sea. To Legolas she sent this word, Legolas, green leaf long under tree, in joy thou hast lived, beware of the sea. If thou hearest the cry of the girl on the shore, thy heart shall then rest in the forest no more. Gandalf fell silent and shut his eyes. Then she sent me no message, said Jimmy, and bent his head. Dark are words, said Legolas, and little do they mean to those that receive them. That is no comfort, said Jimmy. What then, said Legolas, would you have her speak openly to you of your death? Yes, if she had not else to say. What is that, said Gandalf, opening his eyes. Yes, I think I can guess what her words may mean. Your pardon, Jimmy, I was pondering the messages once again, but indeed she sent words to you, and neither dark nor sad. To Jim, son of Glow, she said, give his lady's greeting. Look, bearer, wherever thou goest my thought goes with thee, but have a care to lay thine axe to the right tree. In happy hour you have returned to us. Gandalf, cried the dwarf, capering as he sang loudly in the strange dwarf tongue. Come, come, he shouted, swinging his axe, since Gal's head is now sacred, let us find one that is right to cleave. That will not be far to seek, said Gandalf, rising from his seat. Come, we have spent all the time that is allowed to a meeting of parted friends. Now there is need of haste. They spoke no more words until they stood again upon the grass beyond the eaves of Fangon. There was no sign of their horses to be seen. They have not returned, said Legolas. It will be a weary walk. I shall not walk, time presses, said Gandalf. Then lifting up his head he gave a long whistle. So clear and piercing was the note that the others stood amazed to hear such a sound come from those old bearded lips. 3 times he whistled, and then faint and far off it seemed to them that they heard the whinny of a horse borne up from the plains upon the eastern wind. They waited wondering. Before long there came the sound of hoofs, at first hardly more than a tremor of the ground, perceptible only to Aragon as he lay upon the grass. Then growing steadily louder and clearer to a quick beat. There is more than one horse coming, said Arago. Certainly, said Gandalf, we are too great a burden for one. There are 3, said Legolas, gazing out over the plain. See how they run. There is Hassel, and there is my friend Iode beside him, but there is another that rides ahead, a very great horse. I have not seen his life before, nor will you again, said Gandalf. There is Shadowfax, he is the chief of the Mies, lord of horses, and not even Theoden, king of Rohan, has ever looked on a Better does he not shine like silver and run as smoothly as a swift stream. He has come to me, the horse of the White Rider. We are going to battle together. Even as the old wizard spoke, the great horse came striding up the slope towards them. His coat was glistening and his man flowing in the wind of his speed. The two others followed not now far behind. As soon as Shadowfax saw Gandalf, he checked his pace and whined loud. Then trotting gently forward, he stooped his proud head and nuzzled his great nostrils against the old man's neck. Gandalf caressed him. It is a long way from Rivendell, my friend, he said, but you are wise and swift and come at need far. Let us ride now together and part not in this world again. Soon the other horses came up and stood quietly by as if awaiting orders. We go at once to Meduseld, the hall of your master Theoden, said Gandalf, addressing them gravely. They bowed their heads. Time presses, so with your leave, my friends, we will ride. We beg you to use all the speed that you can, as can be Aragorn and Arad. Legolas, I will sit Gimli before me, and by his leave Shadowfax shall bear us both. We will wait now only to drink a little. Now I understand a part of last night's riddle, said Legolas as he sprang lightly upon S back. Whether they fled at first in fear or not, our horses met Shadowfax their chieftain and greeted him with joy. Did you know that he was at hand, Gondal? Yes, I knew, said the wizard. I bent my thought upon him, bidding him to make haste, for yesterday he was far away in the south of this land. Swiftly may he bear me back again. Gandalf spoke now too. Shadow and the horse set off at a good pace, yet not beyond the measure of the others. After a little while they turned suddenly, and choosing a place where the banks were lower, he waded the river and then led them away due south into a flat land, treeless and wide. The wind went like grey waves through the endless miles of grass. There was no sign of road, of track, but Shadowfax did not stay or falter here, steering at a straight course now to the HS of Theon under the slopes of the White Mountains. Said Gandalf, it will be quicker, sir. The ground is firmer in the east net where the chief northwood track lies across the river, but Shax knows the way through every fen and hollow. For many hours they rode on through the meads and riverlands. Often the grass was so high that it reached above the knees of the rivers, and their steeds seemed to be swimming in a grey-green area. They came upon many hidden pools and broad acres of SGE waving above the net, and treacherous bogs, but Shadowfax found the way and the other horses followed his swath. Slowly the sun fell from the sky down into the west, looking out over the great plain far away. The riders saw it for a moment like a red fire sinking into the grass low upon the edge of sight. Shoulders of the mountains glinted red upon either side. A smoke seemed to rise up and darken the sun's disk to the hue of blood, as if it had kindled the grass as it passed down under the rim of earth. There lies the gap of Rohan, said Gandalf. It is now almost due west of us. That way lies Isengard. I see a great smoke, said Legolas. What may that be? Battle, and with each step, the journey grows more dangerous, but the resolve of the fellowship remains unbroken. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli continue their quest, holding on to hope and loyalty amidst a dark and shifting world. In the next chapter, they'll encounter new allies and even greater threats in their quest to save Middle-earth. Subscribe to Soul Speak Story for the next chapter, where the adventure intensifies and the story unfolds in ways that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Stay tuned, more epic storytelling awaits.